In the gilded silence of his Ikoyi mansion, billionaire Adebayo Adeola lived a life of sterile order, until a storm, a spilled Persian rug, and an unlocked door shattered his world. One glimpse of his maid's vulnerability ignited an obsession he couldn't escape. As society's walls closed in, two souls from opposite worlds would risk everything to prove that love, born in chaos, could rewrite every rule. Now the story in full. Before then, bestie. Please, take a time. Support us by giving us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification button for more of the story. Thank you. So, grab your popcorn and relax as we dive into this powerful story. Adebayo Adeola sat behind a vast, polished mahogany desk in his study, a fortress of leather-bound books, sleek technology, and African art worth more than most Lagos suburbs. At 60, he was a titan carved from ambition and loss. His empire, spanning telecommunications, real estate, and manufacturing, was a testament to relentless drive. Yet, the cavernous rooms of the mansion echoed with an absence deeper than silence. 5 years had passed since cancer stole his wife, Bimp, the vibrant heart of their home. Since then, Adebayo's world had shrunk to two spheres: the high-octane pressure cooker of boardrooms and deals, and the meticulously controlled solitude of this Ikoyi haven. His gaze scanned a complex financial report on his tablet, his expression impassive, the lines around his eyes and mouth etched by time and responsibility. His tailored silk shirt felt crisp, expensive, yet strangely detached from the humid reality just beyond the double-glazed windows. He was a man encased in wealth, in grief, in routine. Staff moved through the mansion like well-programmed ghosts. Footsteps hushed on marble, doors closing with muffled clicks, surfaces perpetually gleaming. Order was his bulwark against chaos. The linchpin of this domestic tranquility was Chioma Nwosu, 28, with intelligent eyes that missed little and a quiet dignity that commanded respect. Chioma was the head housemaid, a position Shed earned through 3 years of impeccable service. She moved through the mansion now, a silent force of efficiency. Her uniform, a crisp, modest dress, was spotless. Her focus was absolute as she meticulously arranged a vase of exotic orchids in the grand foyer, her movements economical and graceful. Her mind, however, was miles away in Enugu, calculating the fees for her younger sister Adeora's upcoming university term. Every naira earned here was a brick in Adeora's future, a future Chioma was determined to build, no matter the personal cost. Her own dreams, whispers of nursing school, a life beyond service, were carefully folded away, practicalities outweighing aspirations. Adebayo glanced up briefly as her shadow passed his study door. Chioma, he acknowledged, his voice deep, accustomed to command. Sir, she replied softly, pausing, her posture attentive but not subservient. The inventory for the guest wing is complete. Everything is in order. Good, he nodded, already returning to his screen. She was a fixture, reliable, almost invisible in her efficiency. He knew her name, her role, the basic fact of her sister's education details filed under staff management. He did not know the weight of responsibility she carried, the quiet humor she reserved for Mama IBG the cook, or the way her eyes softened when she spoke of home. Downstairs, in the staff quarters near the bustling kitchen, the atmosphere was warmer, tinged with the aromas of a egusi soup simmering for the staff lunch. Mama IBG, ample and motherly, clucked over pots. Tund, the sharp-eyed driver, polished silverware with meticulous care. Chioma joined them briefly, exchanging low-voiced pleasantries in Igbo with Mama IBG, a small, genuine smile touching her lips at a shared joke. Here, she wasn't just the help. She was Chioma. But even here, the presence of Oga upstairs was a constant, subtle pressure. As afternoon deepened, the sky over Lagos began to change. The relentless blue haze thickened, taking on a bruised, yellowish hue. The air grew heavier, pressing down, the usual city cacophony seeming to mute itself in anticipation. Adebayo, engrossed in a tense video conference with London, barely registered the deepening gloom outside his window. Chioma, however, felt the shift. She moved swiftly through the house, checking windows on the upper floors, her senses alert to the city's moods. Lagos weather was notoriously fickle, capable of shifting from oppressive heat to violent fury in minutes. Then it broke. With a sound like tearing canvas, the heavens opened. Rain didn't fall. It crashed, a torrential, blinding downpour hammering the mansion's roof and windows with furious intensity. Wind howled, rattling frames. The carefully ordered silence of the Adeola mansion was shattered. Adebayo was pulled from his call by the sudden roar. He frowned, moving to the window. The view of the lagoon was obliterated by a wall of gray water. He heard a sharp cry from upstairs, followed by frantic shouts. Kola the butler's usually calm voice raised in alarm. "Sir, the blue room, the window, the rain is coming in." Adebayo's mind snapped from billionaire to homeowner. The blue room housed a priceless antique Persian rug, a fragile relic of his travels. Water damage would be catastrophic. Without hesitation, driven by instinct to protect his domain, he strode quickly from the study, heading towards the commotion on the upper floor. His polished loafers clicked sharply on the marble stairs, a counterpoint to the drumming rain. He followed the sounds of urgency, knowing Chioma, ever vigilant, would already be at the epicenter of the crisis. His world, so carefully controlled moments before, was suddenly plunged into wet, noisy chaos. The storm was here, and the first ripple of an unforeseen disruption had already begun. The cacophony upstairs was a war zone against the symphony of the storm. Rain lashed the windows like furious fists. Wind howled through gaps Adebayo hadn't known existed, and the frantic shouts of Kola and another staff member, perhaps the young gardener, Emeka, cut through the din bucket. Quickly, more towels. Oya. Adebayo took the stairs two at a time, the plush carpet muffling nothing now. The air grew damper, cooler, smelling sharply of ozone and wet plaster. He reached the upper landing, a wide space overlooking the foyer below, usually serene. Now it felt like the deck of a ship in a typhoon. Water streamed down the far wall of the corridor leading to the prestigious guest wing, originating from the half-open door of the blue room. Kola, usually immaculate, was soaked, wrestling a heavy damask curtain blown inward, while Emeka slid on the wet marble trying to position a bucket under a waterfall cascading from a high, improperly latched window. "The rug," Adebayo barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. He could see the edge of the priceless Persian, darkening ominously near the deluge. He surged forward, ignoring the water soaking the cuffs of his trousers. "Chioma! Where's Chioma?" He instinctively called for his most competent defender against domestic disaster. "Sir," Kola gasped, straining against the wind-whipped fabric. She was securing windows in the east wing. She must have heard. Before Kola could finish, a flash of movement caught Adebayo's peripheral vision. Chioma emerged from a service door further down the corridor, near the seldom-used guest rooms. She was drenched. Her usually neat bun had partially come loose, dark curls plastered to her neck and temples. Water streamed down her face and soaked her gray uniform dress, turning it almost black and clinging heavily to her frame. She held an armful of sodden towels, her expression one of fierce determination mixed with exhaustion. She had clearly been battling leaks elsewhere. "Sir," she called out, her voice strained but clear over the storm's roar. The linen closet flooded. "I need dry." Her eyes darted towards the blue room's crisis, then back down the corridor. Decision flashed in her eyes. The blue room had Kola and Emeka. The immediate need was dry towels now. Without finishing her sentence, she turned and darted towards the nearest source, the door to her own small quarters, tucked away discreetly in this quiet corner of the guest wing. It stood slightly ajar, perhaps blown open by a draft or left that way in her earlier haste. Adebayo, focused solely on salvaging the rug, saw her movement. "Chioma!" "The rug in the blue room," he began, striding after her, needing her efficiency, her ability to fix things. He reached her door just as she vanished inside. He pushed the slightly ajar door wider without a second thought, urgency overriding protocol. "Needs immediate attention. We need..." The words died in his throat. The scene before him froze time. The room was small, neat, spartanly furnished, a narrow bed, a simple dresser, a small window rattling violently under the rain's assault. The gray storm light cast the space in a dim, intimate chiaroscuro. Chioma stood with her back to him, only a few feet away. In her frantic need for dry fabric, she hadn't hesitated. Her soaked uniform dress was half off, pooled around her waist. Shed just peeled the drenched, sand-colored blouse over her head. Adebayo saw the elegant, powerful curve of her spine, the smooth, dark skin of her shoulders gleaming faintly in the gloom. He saw the subtle definition of muscle across her back, earned through years of physical work, a testament to strength, not leisure. He saw the delicate strap of her plain, practical bra, the vulnerable nape of her neck where damp curls clung. It was a moment of raw, unguarded humanity. Exhaustion, urgency, and simple necessity laid bare, utterly devoid of artifice or intention. Then instinct screamed. Chioma sensed his presence. A choked gasp tore from her. She whirled around, eyes wide with shock and utter mortification, clutching the wet blouse shed just removed to her chest like a shield. Her free hand flew up instinctively, though it covered little. Her face, usually composed, was a mask of pure, horrified vulnerability. Oga, the Igbo word for sir, ripped out of her, sharp with terror and shame. I didn't hear. I just needed. She stumbled backwards, hitting the edge of her narrow bed, her gaze locked on him, paralyzed. Adebayo's own shock was a physical blow. Heat flooded his face, a rush so intense it felt like scalding water. His brain, usually razor-sharp, blanked. The priceless rug, the storm, Cola's shouts, everything vanished, replaced by this single, devastating tableau. Not just the unexpected sight, but the profound violation etched on Chioma's face, the sheer wrongness of his presence in this intensely private moment. Chioma, my God, he stammered, the words thick and clumsy. His eyes snapped away, fixing blindly on the rain-lashed window instead of her. My apologies. 1,000 apologies. The rain. The rug. I wasn't thinking. Shame, hot and corrosive, washed over him. He wasn't just Oga intruding. He was a man who had shattered a fundamental boundary. He backed out of the doorway as if burned, his movements jerky. He didn't just close the door. He slammed it shut with a force that echoed down the corridor, louder even than the storm for a split second. He leaned heavily against the wall beside it, pressing his palms flat against the cool plaster. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird, not just from the physical rush, but from the seismic shock of the encounter. The image, the curve of her spine, the sheen of damp skin, the terror in her eyes was seared onto his retinas. It wasn't just the nudity. It was the profound vulnerability, the accidental intimacy, the sheer, unexpected beauty of that unposed moment, colliding violently with his sense of propriety and control. The ordered world of the Adeola mansion had cracked open, and something raw and unforeseen had flooded in. The slam of the door reverberated through Adebayo's skull long after the sound faded, swallowed by the storm's relentless roar. Leaning against the corridor wall, the cool plaster did nothing to quell the inferno raging beneath his skin. Shame, thick and cloying, choked him. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was a profound sense of violation. He had been the violator. The image burned behind his eyelids. The elegant curve of her spine, the vulnerable dip at the base of her neck, the stark terror in her eyes when she turned. It was a beauty he hadn't sought, hadn't expected, witnessed in the worst possible way. I wasn't thinking. The feeble excuse echoed hollowly in his mind. Of course he hadn't been thinking about her privacy, her dignity, the fundamental line head obliterated in his single-minded focus on a damned rug. A fresh wave of Cola's shouts from the blue room finally pierced his paralysis. The rug, the crisis head caused by rushing in. Jaw clenched tight enough to ache. Adebayo pushed himself off the wall, avoiding even a glance at Chioma's closed door. He strode towards the blue room, his earlier urgency replaced by a cold, brittle efficiency. He barked orders, helping Cola and Emeka wrestle the heavy window shut. His movements sharp, devoid of their usual measured grace. He supervised the mopping, the lifting of the rug's sodden corner onto blocks, his voice clipped, his gaze fixed anywhere but on the staff. He felt their sideways glances, heavy with unspoken questions, especially Cola's, but he offered no explanation, no apology beyond the immediate task. The weight of his transgression made casual interaction impossible. He was Oga, the distant authority, retreating further behind the mask. Back in the sanctum of his study, the storm's fury muffled by thick walls and glass, the silence was deafening. He sank into his leather chair, the plush comfort offering none. The financial report lay forgotten. The city lights beyond the rain-streaked window blurred. All he saw was the dim room, the rain-lashed pane, and her. The guilt was corrosive. Head intruded upon her sanctuary, her moment of simple, necessary relief from the storm's assault. Had seen her not just unclothed, but unprepared, stripped of her professional composure, reduced to raw vulnerability. The power imbalance yawned like a chasm beneath him. He was the billionaire employer. She was the maid dependent on his goodwill. His action, however unintended, felt like an abuse of that power. Would she fear for her job? Would she feel unsafe in his home? The thought sickened him more than the initial shock. He poured himself a stiff whiskey, the burn down his throat doing little to cleanse the sour taste of his own behavior. Behind the slammed door, Chioma stood frozen, the wet blouse still clutched to her chest like a flimsy armor. Tremors racked her body, unrelated to the chill of her soaked skin. Mortification, hot and suffocating, flooded her. He saw me. Oga saw me. The words screamed in her mind on a loop. It wasn't just the exposure. It was the sheer powerlessness. He had walked into her space, the one place in this vast mansion that was supposed to be hers, however small. She felt violated, exposed not just physically, but in her very sense of security. The terror in her eyes had mirrored the sudden, terrifying collapse of the world she knew. Her job, her sister's future, her carefully maintained dignity. Everything felt precariously balanced on the edge of his reaction. Slowly, mechanically, she pulled the damp blouse back on, the fabric clinging unpleasantly. She didn't bother with the dress yet. She sank onto the edge of her narrow bed, burying her face in her hands. The storm outside mirrored the tempest within. What would he do? Fire her? Would he tell others? The shame was paralyzing. She imagined the whispers, the pitying or lewd glances from the other staff, especially Mama IBG and Tund. How could she face them? How could she face him? Minutes stretched into an eternity marked only by the drumming rain and the frantic beating of her own heart. She heard muffled voices and activity down the hall, the blue room crisis being managed. Without her, was that a sign? Had he already dismissed her from his mind, or worse, decided her fate? The uncertainty was torture. She couldn't stay hidden forever. Adora's tuition, the rent for her mother's small room in Enugu, they depended on this job. Fear warred with humiliation. Finally, driven by a desperate need to know her standing and a fierce, protective instinct for her livelihood, she forced herself to move. She changed into a dry, spare uniform with numb fingers, smoothed her damp hair back into its tightest bun, and took several deep, shaky breaths, trying to rebuild the wall of professional composure that had been so violently breached. Emerging from her room felt like stepping onto a battlefield. The corridor was quieter now, the immediate leak contained. She avoided looking towards the blue room, focusing instead on the mundane, picking up the sodden towels Shed dropped earlier. Her movements were stiff, robotic. She kept her gaze fixed downward, her senses hyper-alert for his presence. She didn't have to wait long. As she approached the top of the stairs, Adebayo emerged from the blue room, his expression grim, focused on Kola who followed him, speaking in low tones. Chioma froze, her heart leaping into her throat. He looked up. Their eyes met. It was only for a fraction of a second, but it was electric with unspoken turmoil. Adebayo's gaze flickered a flash of something intense, perhaps shame, perhaps residual shock, before it shuttered completely. replaced by an impenetrable, icy mask. He gave the barest, stiff nod and acknowledgement devoid of warmth or apology, and looked immediately back to Kola, dismissing her as if she were part of the furniture. "See, it's completely dry by morning, Kola," he instructed, his voice cold and clipped, continuing his conversation as he walked past her without another glance. Chioma stood rooted to the spot, the pile of wet towels heavy in her arms. His cold dismissal, the absolute lack of any human recognition beyond the obligatory nod, cut deeper than anger might have. It confirmed her worst fears. She was an object of embarrassment, a problem to be ignored. The silence between them wasn't just absence of sound. It was a chasm filled with shame, fear, and the deafening echo of that slammed door. She watched his retreating back until he vanished into his study, the door closing with a soft, final click. Only then did she release the breath she hadn't realized she was holding, the weight of the silent aftermath settling on her shoulders like lead. The storm outside was passing, leaving behind a sodden, bruised city. Inside the Okoye mansion, a different kind of tempest had just begun, its silence echoing louder than any thunder. The storm passed, leaving Lagos steaming under a bruised sky. Inside the Okoye mansion, the physical chaos was swiftly remedied. Wet floors mopped, the salvaged rug expertly tended to by specialists, broken flower pots replaced. But the psychic tremor from the accidental encounter lingered, a persistent aftershock beneath the restored order. For Adebayo, the days following were an exercise in futile control. He buried himself deeper in work, summoning executives for pre-dawn meetings, dissecting complex acquisition proposals with laser focus, his voice a whip crack of authority in the boardroom. He punished his body in the mansion's gym, pushing himself on the treadmill until his lungs burned, the rhythmic thud of his feet an attempt to drown out the unwanted memory. He meticulously reviewed household accounts, questioned Kola about minute details of provisioning, anything to fill the silence within his own mind. But the image persisted. It wasn't just a visual echo, it was a visceral imprint. Head close his eyes during a tense negotiation and see the rain-streaked window in her room, the gray light falling on the curve of her spine. Head be lifting weights and recall the taut definition across her shoulders, not the sculpted result of leisure, but the earned strength of labor. The memory carried the scent of damp plaster and ozone, the sound of her choked gasp, the searing heat of his own shame. Head jerk his attention back to the present, a muscle ticking in his jaw, his irritation flaring at minor disruptions. Kola learned to tread softly, exchanging worried glances with Mama Ibeg. His usual brisk passage through the house became a gauntlet. Head found himself pausing outside the door to the guest wing corridor, a wave of discomfort washing over him. He actively avoided any reason to go near Chioma's room, taking the long way around. When he did encounter her, the air thickened with unspoken tension. He maintained the icy mask of Oga, offering curt nods or monosyllabic instructions, his gaze sliding past her as if she were invisible. Yet, paradoxically, this enforced distance made him hyper-aware of her presence. He could sense her quiet movements, the rustle of her uniform, the soft click of a door closing down the hall. His peripheral vision became traitorously acute. Then, slowly, insidiously, the lens through which he viewed Chioma Nwosu began to crack. It started subtly. He was dictating a memo in his study one morning when a minor commotion erupted in the hallway, the sharp clatter of porcelain hitting marble, followed by a young maid's stifled sob. He frowned, irritation rising. Before he could rise, Chioma's calm, firm voice cut through the distress. "Peace, Neka. It's only a cup. Breathe." Adebayo peered out. Chioma was already there, kneeling beside the trembling girl, Neka, who had dropped a tray bearing his expensive Limoges coffee service. Shards littered the floor, but Chioma wasn't scolding. Her hand rested gently on Neka's shoulder. "See? No harm done to you. Accidents happen. We will clean it. Together. Now breathe." Her voice was low, steady, imbued with a quiet authority that wasn't harsh but reassuring. Neka's sobs subsided into hiccups. Adebayo watched, unseen, as Chioma efficiently directed the cleanup. Her movements practical yet infused with a compassion Head never associated with his efficient head maid. He saw the genuine concern in her eyes as she reassured Neka, promising to speak to Mama IBG about the broken cup herself. She carries the weight for them, he realized with a jolt. Not just tasks, but their worries. Days later, he passed the grand living room. Chioma was arranging a new display of exotic birds of paradise in a tall, crystal vase. He paused, ostensibly checking his watch, but his eyes were drawn to her. It wasn't just the speed or neatness. It was the grace. Her hands moved with a fluid, almost artistic precision, turning each vibrant bloom, adjusting the angle of a leaf, stepping back to assess the balance. There was a quiet focus, a dedication to creating something beautiful in the space he merely inhabited. Had never noticed that before. Had only seen the finished product, not the artistry behind it. The most profound crack came unexpectedly. He was working late in his study, the mansion silent. He stepped out to get a glass of water and saw a sliver of light from the half-open door of the small staff sitting room near the kitchen. He heard Chioma's voice, softer than Head ever heard it, murmuring in Igbo. Curiosity, a feeling he rarely indulged regarding staff, prickled. He moved silently closer. Chioma was sitting alone, bathed in the glow of a single lamp, looking at her phone. On the screen was a photograph, a young girl, beaming proudly in a university sweatshirt, holding a certificate. Edora. Chioma wasn't just looking. She was gazing, her stern professional mask completely dissolved. A smile, warm and unguarded, lit up her entire face, transforming her features. It was a smile of pure, fierce love and pride. Adebayo felt a strange pang, an echo of the pride he felt for his own daughter, Bisola, but underscored by a rawness, a sense of hard-won triumph. This wasn't just a sister. This was her purpose, the engine driving her quiet competence. He retreated unseen, the glass of water forgotten. Back in his study, the financial reports blurred again. The accidental image of her vulnerability resurfaced, but now it was overlaid with these new glimpses. Her compassionate strength with Neka, her artistic grace with the flowers, the radiant love for her sister. The shock of the accidental sighting hadn't just imprinted her physical form. It had shattered the opaque lens labeled the Maid through which Head viewed Chiomanwosu for 3 years. Horror washed over him, cold and distinct from the earlier shame. How had he been so blind? Head employed a remarkable woman, intelligent, resilient, compassionate, driven, and reduced her to a function, a uniform, a name on a payroll. Head inhabited the same space, benefited from her skill and dedication, and never truly seen her. The power imbalance Head violated felt even more grotesque now. He hadn't just invaded the privacy of an employee. Head intruded upon the sanctuary of a complex, admirable human being whose life and struggles and joys existed entirely outside his purview. The meticulously ordered world of Adebayo Adeola hadn't just cracked. The lens through which he viewed a significant part of it lay in irreparable shards at his feet. He stared out at the glittering Lagos nightscape, no longer seeing the city's familiar lights, but seeing instead the profound, unsettling truth. Chiomanwosu existed, fully, vividly, independently of his needs or his mansion. And he had no idea what to do with that revelation, except that ignoring it, pretending the lens was intact, was no longer possible. The silence now held the deafening roar of a perception irrevocably changed. The shattered lens couldn't be glued back together. Adebayo Adeola moved through his meticulously reconstructed world like a man navigating a subtly altered landscape. The familiar contours of his mansion, the rhythm of his work, the deference of his staff, all remained. Yet everything felt different, viewed through the unsettling clarity of his new awareness. Chiomanwosu was no longer a component of his household machinery. She was a constant, undeniable presence in his peripheral consciousness, radiating a quiet intensity he couldn't ignore. His internal conflict became a relentless drumbeat beneath the surface of his controlled existence. The societal norms ingrained in him since childhood screamed warnings. She is your employee, your maid. The gulf between your stations is an ocean. Lego society will feast on the scandal. You hold all the power. Pursuing this is inherently exploitative. Femi's pragmatic voice echoed these warnings, a grim counterpoint to the quiet hum of attraction that had taken root. The ethical implications were a minefield. How could any gesture, any word, not be tainted by the inherent imbalance? The memory of her terrified eyes in her doorway was a constant, sobering reminder of the vulnerability had already exploited, however unintentionally. Yet, the more he fought the pull, the stronger it became. It wasn't merely the residual image of her vulnerability. It was the woman emerging from the fragments of his old perception. He found himself cataloging details with an intensity that bordered on obsession. 1. The intelligence. He overheard her discussing the logistics of a large charity gala Mama IBEJIS church group was planning, using his phone in the kitchen hallway. She wasn't just relaying messages. She was analyzing vendor quotes, suggesting cost-saving alternatives for decorations, and troubleshooting a seating chart conflict with calm, incisive logic that mirrored his own boardroom strategies. If we move Chief Adekunle here, she was saying, and place pastor's wife there, it avoids the issue with the choir sightlines and keeps both parties happy. Adebayo paused, unseen, genuinely impressed. This wasn't rote execution. This was strategic problem-solving. 2. The resilience. One sweltering afternoon, a major plumbing leak erupted in the basement laundry, threatening to flood expensive appliances. Adebayo arrived to find Chioma already directing operations. Soaked again, but utterly composed. She was elbow-deep, helping Tund wrestle a heavy valve shut, her voice steady as she instructed junior staff on water diversion. There was no panic, only focused competence and a physical endurance that spoke of deep reserves of strength. He saw the determined set of her jaw, the taut line of her shoulders under the wet fabric, and felt a surge of admiration that was dangerously close to something else. 3. The fleeting expressions. He caught glimpses when she thought no one was looking. A tiny, almost imperceptible sigh of relief when a stubborn stain finally lifted from an antique tablecloth. A flash of irritation quickly mastered when a delivery was late. A soft, private smile directed at a WhatsApp message, likely Adaora, that lit her eyes before the professional mask slid back into place. These micro-expressions were revelations, painting a picture of a rich inner life he was only beginning to fathom. 4. The physical awareness. This was the most treacherous current. He noticed the way sunlight caught the deep richness of her skin as she polished silver in the morning room. The graceful arc of her neck as she reached to dust a high shelf. The quiet efficiency of her movements, imbued with a natural elegance. The clean, practical scent of soap and starch that lingered faintly in a room after she'd been there. His body reacted with a traitorous hum of awareness, a physical pull that was utterly distinct from the intellectual admiration and ethical horror. It was primal, inconvenient, and terrifyingly persistent. Chioma, meanwhile, navigated this new, charged atmosphere with heightened sensitivity. She felt the weight of his gaze, even when his eyes seemed focused elsewhere. The curt nods and monosyllabic instructions continued, but there was a different quality to his attention, a lingering intensity that hadn't been there before the storm. It wasn't leering. It felt observant, deeply, unsettlingly observant. She became hypervigilant. She ensured her uniform was immaculate, her bun severe, her posture rigidly professional. She minimized unnecessary presence, timing her tasks to avoid crossing his path. Conversations were pared down to absolute essentials, delivered with eyes respectfully averted. When he did speak directly to her, even about mundane household matters, she felt a prickle of nervous energy, her responses measured and brief. One afternoon, while Adebayo was reviewing documents in the sun-drenched conservatory, Chioma entered quietly to water the large collection of potted ferns and orchids. She moved with her usual efficiency, but Adebayo found his concentration fraying. He watched, ostensibly reading a contract clause, as she stretched to reach a hanging basket, the movement causing her uniform skirt to pull slightly taut across her hip. A jolt of pure, unwanted attraction shot through him, visceral and immediate. His pen stilled on the paper. Chioma sensed the shift in the room's energy. She froze mid-reach, then slowly lowered her arms, turning slightly. Her eyes met his, not by accident this time, but with a direct, searching look. There was no fear now, not like in her room. Instead, there was a profound wariness, a silent question hanging in the air. "What are you looking at? What do you want?" Adebayo held her gaze for a heartbeat too long. The contract forgotten. The drumbeat of conflict roared in his ears. Societal condemnation, ethical peril, the chasm of power, warring with the magnetic pull of her presence and the startling clarity of her returned gaze. He saw the intelligence, the strength, the wariness, the person challenging him silently. He broke the stare first, looking down abruptly at the meaningless words on the page. He cleared his throat, a rough, uncomfortable sound. "The spathiphyllum in the corner," he said, his voice sounding strained even to his own ears. "It needs feeding. See to it." It was a dismissal, an order, a desperate retreat behind the shield of Oga. "Of course, sir," Chioma replied, her voice perfectly neutral, but the wariness didn't leave her eyes. She finished her task swiftly and left the conservatory without a backward glance. Adebayo remained seated long after she was gone, the contract unread. The unspoken observations were no longer passive. They were a battlefield. He was acutely aware of her, drawn to her in ways that defied logic and propriety, yet paralyzed by the monumental risks and the profound responsibility his position demanded. And Chioma? She was no longer just mortified or fearful. She was watchful, guarded, and acutely aware that the ground beneath her feet in the Ikoyi mansion had become perilously unstable. The silence between them was no longer just an echo. It was a charged space filled with unspoken questions and dangerous possibilities, observed by both with growing, wary intensity. The conservatory encounter left Adebayo feeling scraped raw. The wariness in Chioma's eyes, the silent challenge, had been a mirror reflecting the uncomfortable truth. His internal turmoil was leaking out. He couldn't continue oscillating between frozen avoidance and hyper-observant tension. It was unfair to her, corrosive to him, and unsustainable for the household. The ethical quagmire remained, a sucking mud threatening to pull him under. But the alternative, maintaining the icy, dismissive status quo, felt increasingly like a lie. He couldn't unsee her. He spent a sleepless night wrestling with it. Femi's warnings about scandal and exploitation echoed, met now by a quieter, more insistent voice. "She is a person. Treat her like one." Not as a romantic pursuit, the risks were still too vast, the power imbalance too profound, but simply as a human being deserving of basic respect and acknowledgement beyond her function. The accidental violation demanded, at the very least, a restoration of dignity. He owed her that much. The resolution, when it came with the pale Lagos dawn, was simple. He would engage. Not as a suitor, but as a decent man recognizing another. He would consciously dismantle the wall of Oga head reinforced since the storm, brick by careful brick, starting with the most neutral territory possible. He found his opportunity later that morning. Passing the large, sunlit kitchen where the comforting aromas of akra frying and oji, pap, steaming filled the air. He saw Chioma conferring quietly with Mama IBG over the week's menu. Her back was to him, her posture as rigidly professional as ever. Mama IBEG spotted him first, her warm smile faltering slightly into polite deference. "Oga, good morning." Chioma turned instantly, her expression smoothing into the impassive mask she now wore constantly in his presence. "Good morning, sir." Adebayo felt the familiar tension coiling in his shoulders. He forced himself to stop in the doorway, rather than just nodding and walking past as had become his habit. He met Chioma's eyes directly, consciously softening his own gaze, willing away the habitual sternness. He saw the immediate flicker of surprise, quickly veiled. "Good morning, Mama IBEG." "Chioma," he acknowledged, his voice deliberately pitched lower, less clipped. He paused, the silence stretching for a beat too long. Mama Ibj's eyebrows crept upwards almost imperceptibly. Chioma waited, her hands clasped loosely before her, betraying nothing. Adebayo cleared his throat. The question head settled on felt monumental in the charged quiet. He focused on Chioma. Chioma, he began again, the name feeling deliberate on his tongue, not just an identifier. Was meaning to ask. He saw the subtle tightening around her eyes, bracing for an instruction, perhaps a reprimand. How is your sister, Edora? He kept his tone level, genuinely inquiring. Is her university term progressing well? The effect was electric, yet contained. Chioma's eyes widened a fraction, the professional mask slipping momentarily to reveal pure, unguarded shock. Her lips parted slightly. It was the first time in 3 years he had initiated a conversation unrelated to household duties. The first time Head asked about her personal life since the perfunctory hiring inquiries. Mama Ibg froze, the spatula hovering over the frying akara, her gaze darting between Adebayo and Chioma with undisguised curiosity. Chioma recovered swiftly, but the rigid tension in her shoulders eased almost imperceptibly. She blinked, then lowered her gaze for a second, perhaps collecting herself. When she looked back up, the wariness was still there, but it was overlaid with a profound, cautious surprise. She is well, sir, she replied, her voice softer than usual. Thank you for asking. Her term is going. It is going very well. She is studying hard. A hint of the pride Adebayo had seen in the photograph warmed her tone, despite her effort to remain formal. I am glad to hear it, Adebayo said, nodding. He felt a strange lightness, a release of pressure. It was a tiny step, insignificant in the grand scheme, yet it felt like breaching a fortress wall. Education is a precious thing. The platitude felt inadequate, but it was sincere. It is, sir, Chioma agreed softly. Very precious. There was a wealth of meaning in those 2 words, a lifetime of sacrifice and hope embedded in them. Mama Ibg, sensing the delicate moment, tactfully turned back to her frying pan, giving a soft hum as if engrossed in her task, though her ears were undoubtedly pricked. Adebayo held Chioma's gaze for another moment, acknowledging the exchange, then gave a small, deliberate nod. Good. Carry on. He turned and walked away, his pace measured. He didn't look back, but he felt the weight of their combined gazes. Chioma's shocked, thoughtful. Mama Ibj's intensely curious, following him down the hall. Back in his study, the usual sanctuary felt different. The air seemed less heavy. He hadn't solved the ethical dilemma. He hadn't confessed burgeoning feelings. He hadn't even apologized again for the intrusion. But he had done something fundamental. He had acknowledged Chioma Nwosu as a person with a life, a family, aspirations outside the walls of his mansion. He had created a tiny, deliberate crack in the facade of employer-employee detachment. In the kitchen, the silence after Adebayo's departure was thick. The sizzle of the akara was the only sound for several heartbeats. Chioma stared at the empty doorway, the echo of his question, "How is your sister?" ringing in her ears. The genuine inquiry, the softened tone, the use of Adeora's name. It was disorienting. Mama Ibg broke the silence, her voice a low rumble. "Nne, what was that?" She didn't look up from her frying, but the question hung heavy. "Oga asking after your sister like family?" Chioma slowly turned back to the menu they'd been discussing, her fingers tracing the words without seeing them. I don't know, Mama," she murmured, her mind racing. Was it a test? A strange, belated attempt at apology? Or something else entirely? The cold dismissal after the incident had been painful, but predictable. This was different, unsettling in a new way. It felt like a door, long sealed, being nudged open just a fraction, letting in an unexpected draft. The wariness remained, a deep-seated instinct for self-preservation. Yet, beneath it, a tiny, treacherous spark of something else flickered. Not hope, not yet, but perhaps a sliver of cautious recognition. He had seen Adeora not just as a detail on a staff file, but as the center of her world. He had looked at her, Chioma, and asked about her life. The crack in his facade mirrored a tiny, hesitant breach in her own wall of defensive professionalism. The silence in the kitchen now held a new kind of tension, no longer just fear or avoidance, but the charged quiet of a first, fragile connection tentatively established across the vast, complicated gulf between them. The crack in Adebayo's facade, however small, didn't go unnoticed in the intricate ecosystem of the Adeola mansion. Like a stone dropped into a still pond, the simple question, "How is your sister?" sent out ripples that disturbed the carefully maintained surface of staff life. Mama Ibeg, the undisputed matriarch of the domestic staff, became the epicenter of the initial tremor. Her keen eyes and decades of navigating elite households made her an astute observer. Adebayo's softened tone, his deliberate pause, the specificity of asking about Adeora. It wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. While she expertly flipped Akira later that day, she cornered Kola near the pantry, her voice a conspiratorial murmur beneath the kitchen's usual bustle. "Kola, Baiko, did you see Oga this morning?" asking after Chioma's sister like a concerned uncle. Her eyes narrowed meaningfully. After weeks of looking through her like glass, something is shifting in the wind. I can smell it. Kola, ever the discreet butler, just his cufflinks, his expression thoughtful. He has been different since the storm incident, Mama. Distant, then intensely watchful now. He kept his voice low. It is a marked change. We must be observant. His concern wasn't just gossip. It was for the household's delicate equilibrium and Chioma's position. The whispers started subtly. Tund, polishing the Rolls-Royce in the garage, mentioned Oga's unusual pause near the laundry room yesterday where Chioma was folding linens. Didn't say a word, just stood there, like he was thinking hard about something. Or someone. Emeka, the young gardener, added fuel when he reported seeing Oga seemingly watching Chioma arrange flowers on the veranda for an unusually long time from his study window. Not angry-like, just looking. The speculation wasn't malicious initially. It was the natural hum of a closed environment reacting to a disruption in the established hierarchy. Was Oga feeling guilty? Was Chioma in some kind of trouble? Or was it something else? The something else remained unspoken but hung heavy in the air, charged with the inherent tension of their positions. In the staff dining room during lunch breaks, conversations would hush slightly when Chioma entered, replaced by overly bright smiles and sudden interest in the jollof rice. She felt the weight of their curious glances, the unasked questions prickling her skin like static. Chioma, already navigating her own internal minefield, found the heightened scrutiny suffocating. The cautious spark ignited by Adebayo's question was immediately doused by a resurgence of wariness. Mama Ibj's probing, though well-intentioned, felt like pressure. "That Adeora of yours is a bright star," NNE Mama Ibg said pointedly one afternoon while they shelled beans. "Such a future she has, thanks to her sister's hard work. It would be a terrible shame if anything disturbed that future, eh?" The unspoken warning was clear. Don't rock the boat. Your sister's dreams are on the line. The pressure didn't just come from inside. Adeora called one evening, her voice bubbling with excitement about a prestigious university essay competition. The prize includes a full scholarship for next term. Chioma, can you imagine? But the application fee is quite steep and due next week. The hope in her sister's voice was a physical ache. Chioma calculated rapidly. Her savings were meticulously planned, earmarked for the next term's core fees. The unexpected application fee was a significant strain. "Don't worry, Ada," she said, forcing lightness into her tone. "We'll manage. You focus on writing the best essay you can." Hanging up, the weight of responsibility settled heavier than ever. Every naira counted. Losing this job wasn't just a setback. It would be catastrophic for Adeora. The combination of external scrutiny and internal financial pressure made Chioma withdraw further. She became a ghost in the mansion, perfect in her duties, utterly silent. She perfected the art of invisibility, timing her movements to avoid not just Adebayo, but clusters of staff. Her interactions were pared down to monosyllabic efficiency. The brief connection Adebayo had attempted seemed buried under layers of renewed caution. When he passed her in the hall the day after Adeora's call, he offered a neutral good afternoon, Chioma. Her response was a barely audible sir, delivered without eye contact, her posture radiating a do not approach signal as potent as any barrier. He felt the rebuff. A subtle closing of the tiny door head nudged open. The tension reached a quiet peak one humid afternoon. Chioma was meticulously dusting the seldom-used formal drawing room. Unseen in the adjoining hallway, Emeka and Tund were taking a break, their voices carrying. "I still think it's strange," Emeka muttered. "All that attention after he walked in on her? Maybe he liked what he saw." There was a crude suggestiveness in his tone. Tund's response was sharper. "Careful, boy. That's dangerous talk. Oga is Oga, and Chioma is a decent woman. Decent women don't get noticed by billionaires unless they want to be," Emeka retorted, a hint of envy in his voice. "Maybe she's playing a long game. Get him feeling guilty, then, bam, money bag." Chioma froze, the dust cloth clenched tightly in her fist. The crude insinuation, the reduction of her to a schemer or a target, felt like a physical blow. It crystallized her deepest fears, not just job loss, but the destruction of her reputation, the judgment, the whispers that could follow her anywhere. The fragile sense of being seen as a person evaporated, replaced by the terrifying prospect of being seen as an opportunist or worse. She didn't confront them. Silently, trembling slightly, she finished her task and left the room, her face a mask of stoic calm belying the turmoil within. The mansion, once a place of hard work and relative security, now felt like a gilded cage filled with watchful eyes and dangerous assumptions. Adebayo's attempt at connection had inadvertently amplified the stakes, turning every glance into a potential threat and every whisper into a warning. The weight of Adeora's future pressed down on one shoulder, the crushing fear of scandal and judgment pressed down on the other. Chioma walked a razor's edge, her silence no longer just professional, but a shield against a world that suddenly felt perilously unstable. Adebayo felt Chioma's retreat like a physical chill in the mansion's opulent halls. Her rebuff after Adeora's call was a clear signal. The tiny crack head opened had been swiftly plastered over, fortified by fear and the insidious whispers he sensed swirling around her. The crude speculation Emeka had voiced, later reported to him by a furious Tund, ignited a cold fury within him. It crystallized the dangers she faced simply because he had dared to see her as human. His initial resolve hardened. He couldn't force connection, but he could demonstrate consistently and respectfully that his interest wasn't predatory or fleeting. He would show her she was seen, valued, heard not as a maid, but as Chioma Nwosu. He chose his moments carefully, seeking neutral, undeniable common ground. One afternoon, Adebayo had a newly acquired piece delivered, a striking, abstract bronze sculpture by a renowned Yoruba artist. He had it placed temporarily in the grand foyer. Later, finding Chioma dusting a nearby console, he approached deliberately. "Chioma," he said, his tone conversational, "what do you make of this new piece?" He gestured towards the bronze. Chioma paused, her duster hovering. Her eyes flickered from him to the sculpture, wary confusion evident. This wasn't her domain. "It is very modern, sir," she offered cautiously, the safest possible answer. "Indeed," Adebayo acknowledged. "But what does it say to you? Does it feel Legos or something else?" He genuinely valued diverse perspectives on art, often finding insights in unexpected places. He waited, giving her space. Chioma studied the sculpture, her professional mask softening into genuine contemplation. She stepped slightly closer, tilting her head. "It feels strong, like the city, but also restless. See how the lines twist, like traffic in Victoria Island at rush hour. And the rough texture. It reminds me of the old coral bricks in Badagry. Solid but worn by time." She stopped abruptly, as if surprised by her own words, her gaze snapping back to him, defensive walls slamming up. "But I know nothing of art, sir." Adebayo was genuinely impressed. Her observation was visceral and insightful, connecting the abstract form to the lived texture of Lagos in a way he hadn't considered. On the contrary, Chioma, he said, a note of sincere appreciation in his voice. That is precisely what art should evoke, a feeling, a memory. You see it very clearly. He didn't press further, simply nodding and moving on, leaving her staring after him, the dusting forgotten, a flicker of bewildered pride warring with her suspicion. A few days later, Mama Ibeg complained loudly in the kitchen about the poor quality and inflated price of ugwu, pumpkin leaves, from their usual high-end supplier. Adebayo, coincidentally passing by, overheard. He stepped into the doorway. Mama Ibeg, is there a better source? He then deliberately included Chioma, who was sorting lentils at the table. Chioma, you mentioned your family sources locally. Where would you find the best ugwu? And editan, bitter leaf? He framed it as a practical household query, but his intent was clear, acknowledging her expertise. Chioma looked up, surprised again. She hesitated, then spoke with quiet authority. For freshness and price, Mile 12 Market, sir. Early, but it is very busy, chaotic. For reliability and good quality, though slightly higher price, Balagan Market, Stall C24. Mama Nkechi knows me. She saves the best for regulars. For Editan, nothing beats the small women who bring baskets straight from Ogun Farms to Tejusho Market on Tuesdays. Washed and sorted perfectly. She listed the options concisely, her knowledge undeniable. Balagan, Stall C24, Adebayo repeated, committing it to memory. Thank you, Chioma. That is valuable insight. Kola, please add just the provisioning accordingly. He saw Mama Ibeg give Chioma a subtle, approving nod. Chioma merely ducked her head back to her lentils, but a hint of satisfaction softened the tense line of her shoulders. Her knowledge, born of necessity and experience, had been recognized as useful, not menial. The most significant moment came indirectly. Adebayo was reviewing proposals for his foundation's annual healthcare grants, focusing on rural clinics. Brochures and reports were spread across his study desk. Chioma entered quietly to replenish his water carafe. Her gaze, inevitably drawn to the medical imagery, a photo of a community health worker administering an immunization, lingered for a fraction too long. Adebayo caught the expression on her face. Not just passing interest, but a profound, almost hungry longing. He didn't comment then. But later, when she returned to tidy the study, he deliberately left one specific brochure open, highlighting a scholarship program for mature students pursuing nursing diplomas, sponsored by a partner foundation. He pretended to be engrossed in another document. Chioma approached the desk, her movements slowing as she gathered discarded papers. Her eyes scanned the open brochure. Adebayo watched, holding his breath, from beneath slightly lowered lids. He saw her fingers tremble slightly as she picked up a sheet near it. She stared at the brochure, her mask completely gone, replaced by naked yearning. It was the look she reserved for Adeora's achievements, now directed at a future she thought closed to her. He waited until she was almost finished. Essential work, isn't it? He remarked casually, gesturing towards the healthcare materials. Proper community nursing makes such a difference where resources are scarce. He kept his tone neutral, observational. Chioma jumped slightly, then composed herself. Yes, sir, she replied, her voice thick with suppressed emotion. It saves lives, changes everything for families. She paused, then the words seemed to slip out, soft and hesitant. I once thought, long ago, to be a nurse. She immediately looked down, busying herself with the papers, as if regretting the admission. Adebayo's heart clenched. The puzzle piece clicked into place. Her quiet competence, her compassion with Neka, her efficient handling of minor first aid kits in the house. It wasn't just innate kindness. It was a trained instinct, a dream deferred. It is a noble calling, he said softly, meaning it, requiring great strength and heart. He didn't probe further, respecting the vulnerability of her admission, but the knowledge settled deep within him. Chioma Nwosu wasn't just surviving. She harbored ambitions, stifled but not extinguished. For Chioma, these interactions were a disorienting dance. Each time Adebayo approached about art, markets, even nursing, the initial jolt of wariness was immediate. Was this a trap? A billionaire's fleeting curiosity? But the pattern was undeniable. He sought her opinion, her knowledge, her perspective. He listened. He valued her input. The sincerity in his appreciation for her market knowledge, the genuine interest in her view of the sculpture, the respectful acknowledgement of her nursing dream, these chipped away at her defenses. The crude whispers of Emeka still echoed, a chilling counterpoint, but the man before her consistently defied them. He wasn't leering, he was learning about her. She found herself, despite her best efforts, noticing him differently too. The intensity in his eyes when he discussed the rural clinics wasn't just business. It was passion. The slight furrow in his brow when he concentrated. The rare, fleeting relaxation of his stern features when he examined a piece of art he loved. She saw the weight of his isolation, the burden of his empire. The Oga facade, while still present, seemed thinner, revealing glimpses of a complex, weary man beneath. One evening, as she finished setting the small table on the terrace where he sometimes dined alone, he was reviewing documents. He sighed, rubbing his temples, a gesture of fatigue she'd never seen him show so openly in front of staff. He looked up, catching her gaze just as she was about to slip away. For a moment, neither wore a mask. She saw his exhaustion, the human vulnerability beneath the billionaire. He saw her quiet observation, devoid of fear, simply seeing him. "Long day, Chioma?" He asked, the question simple, but the use of her name and the softness in his tone acknowledging the shared moment of unmasking. "It has, sir," she replied equally softly, "but manageable. I hope yours improves." It wasn't just politeness. It held a sliver of genuine, cautious empathy. He gave a small, tired smile. "Thank you." It was the most human exchange they'd ever had. As she walked back inside, Chioma felt a confusing mix of warmth and trepidation. The uniform still defined her role, but Adebayo Adeola was persistently, respectfully, looking beyond it. He was seeing Chioma, and against her will, guarded as she was beginning to see Adebayo. The whispers hadn't stopped, but a quiet counterpoint had emerged, the undeniable evidence of his consistent, respectful attention. The journey beyond the uniform had begun, not with grand gestures, but with shared glimpses of art, markets, dreams, and unexpected moments of shared humanity. The fragile connection budding between Adebayo and Chioma was violently overshadowed by an external tempest. A hostile takeover attempt, orchestrated by a ruthless rival conglomerate with deep political ties, slammed into Adeola Holdings. False rumors of financial instability were leaked to the press. Key partners got cold feet. The Lagos Stock Exchange reacted with punishing volatility. It was a meticulously planned assault, exploiting a minor liquidity crunch Adebayo had been quietly managing. Overnight, his meticulously built empire trembled on its foundations. The calm, controlled billionaire vanished. In his place stormed a man consumed by siege mentality. The Ikoyi mansion became a war room. Executives arrived grim-faced at dawn and left near midnight. Phones rang incessantly. Adebayo's voice, usually a whip crack of authority, became a ragged growl, laced with frustration and barely contained fury. He snapped at Kola over misplaced documents, barked at a junior maid for a lukewarm coffee, slammed his study door so hard a nearby African mask rattled on the wall. The usual atmosphere of efficient serenity shattered, replaced by a thick fog of tension. Staff moved like mice avoiding a prowling cat, exchanging frightened glances. Even Kola looked strained, his usual impeccable composure fraying. Chioma observed the unraveling with growing concern. She saw the shadows deepening under Adebayo's bloodshot eyes, the barely touched trays of food returned from his study, the way his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his buzzing phone. The controlled intensity shed glimpsed beneath the Oga facade had curdled into something darker, more desperate. The man who had recently sought her opinion on art and markets seemed buried under the weight of impending ruin. One afternoon, witnessing him explode at Tund over a 5-minute delay with the car, a delay caused by Lagos' infamous go-slow traffic, a pang of unexpected empathy struck her. It wasn't just fear for her job if he fell. She saw the human cost of the pressure, the isolation at the top. He was drowning, and everyone was too afraid, or too deferential, to throw him a line. The breaking point came late one evening. A crucial conference call with potential Singaporean investors collapsed acrimoniously. Adebayo's furious shouts echoed down the hallway, culminating in the sound of shattering glass, likely his favorite crystal tumbler meeting the wall. Silence followed, heavy and ominous. Chioma, finishing up in the adjacent library, felt the oppressive weight of it. She pictured him alone in the wreckage of his study, surrounded by enemies and crumbling plans. The whispers about her own precarious position, Adeora's looming fees, the societal gulf, all momentarily receded. In that moment, she saw only a man broken by forces threatening everything he'd built. An idea born of instinct rather than calculation formed. It was risky, could be misconstrued as presumption, or worse, pity. But the memory of his genuine appreciation for her insights, the shared human moment of fatigue on the terrace, pushed her. She slipped down to the kitchen, thankfully empty at this hour. Mama Ibeg had left a pot of freshly brewed zobo, hibiscus tea, steeping, a staple in many Nigerian homes, known for its calming properties. Chioma poured a generous amount into his favorite sturdy ceramic mug, not the fine china reserved for guests. Then, she hesitated. Words felt dangerous, inadequate. An Igbo proverb her grandmother used during hard times surfaced. Miri zu, oge adi, the rain falls, but the time for sunshine will come. Spoke of impermanence, resilience, hope. Taking a deep breath, she found a small, plain note card. With careful script, she wrote the proverb in Igbo, then added a simple translation beneath. This too shall pass. No signature, just the words. She placed the mug, steaming gently, and the note on a small tray and carried it towards his study. The door was slightly ajar. Peering cautiously through the gap, her heart hammered. Adebayo sat slumped in his leather chair, head in his hands, silhouetted against the dim light of a single desk lamp. Broken glass glittered on the floor near the wall. The air felt thick with despair. For a second, Chioma almost retreated. This was madness. What was she doing? But the image of his bowed shoulders held her. Steeling herself, she pushed the door open just enough to slide the tray silently onto a small side table near the entrance. A spot he'd pass if he left, but far enough to maintain distance. She didn't speak, didn't wait to be seen. She placed it down, turned, and slipped away as quietly as a shadow, melting back into the dim hallway before he could even register her presence. Adebayo heard the soft clink of ceramic on wood. He lifted his head slowly, his vision blurry with fatigue and defeat. He saw the tray, saw the familiar earthy red hue of zobo steaming in his practical mug. Puzzlement cut through the fog of despair. Who? His gaze fell on the small note card. He reached out, his fingers trembling more noticeably now, and picked it up. The elegant Igbo script flowed across the top. Miri zu oge adi. Below, the translation. This too shall pass. Recognition slammed into him. Chioma's handwriting. Had seen it on inventory lists, memos to staff. The choice of zobo, not coffee, not brandy, but a soothing, familiar comfort. The proverb. Simple, profound, undeniably Nigerian, speaking directly to the heart of his crisis. The rain falls, but sunshine comes. It wasn't empty platitude. It was an offering of perspective, of shared cultural resilience. And Shed delivered it silently, without intrusion, respecting his space even in his darkest moment. The raw vulnerability had shown, the shouting, the broken glass had been witnessed, not judged, but met with kindness. Practical, thoughtful kindness. Not from a sycophant, not from a board member, but from Chioma Nwosu, the woman whose privacy had violated, whose position made this gesture incredibly brave. The weight of his isolation, the crushing pressure, seemed to lift fractionally. He wasn't entirely alone in this gilded cage. Someone had seen his despair and offered a quiet hand, not to fix it, but to remind him it wasn't permanent. He picked up the mug. The warmth seeped into his cold hands. He took a sip. The familiar tart-sweet tang of the hibiscus, fragrant and calming, spread through him. He read the note again. This too shall pass. A simple truth, but one head lost sight of in the maelstrom. He didn't call out to her. He didn't rush to thank her. He sat in the dim light, cradling the mug, the note resting beside him. The fury receded, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion, but also a flicker of something else, gratitude. Yes, but more. A sense of being anchored. In the midst of the unraveling, Chioma had become his unexpected, silent anchor. Her quiet strength, her perceptive compassion, cut through the chaos with startling clarity. The intricate financial reports, the hostile emails, the shouting matches, they hadn't grounded him. This simple mug of Zobo and a handwritten proverb did. The realization was humbling and transformative. The storm raged outside, but within the eye of his personal chaos, Adebayo Adeola found a moment of precarious peace, gifted by the woman he was only beginning to truly see. Her strength became his lifeline, not just in that moment, but as a beacon pointing towards the resilience he needed to reclaim. The quiet anchor Chioma provided during the takeover storm didn't calm the seas. It merely gave Adebayo a fixed point to orient himself amidst the continuing tempest. The crisis raged on, fraught negotiations, legal salvos, volatile markets, demanding his relentless focus. Yet, beneath the surface of boardroom battles, a deeper, more personal conflict churned with terrifying intensity. The image of the Zobo mug and the handwritten proverb haunted him more persistently than any financial spreadsheet. Chioma's quiet strength, her perceptive kindness, the undeniable pull of her presence. It had crystallized into something perilous: love. The realization struck him not with euphoria, but with a cold wave of dread. He sat in his study late one night, the city lights a glittering tapestry below, a half-finished brandy untouched beside him. He wasn't a man prone to romantic delusions. This wasn't infatuation born of a glimpse. It was a profound, terrifying respect and affection forged through months of observation, shattered perceptions, and her anchoring presence in his darkest hour. He admired her intelligence, her resilience, her quiet dignity, her fierce devotion to her sister. He craved her calm strength, her grounded perspective, and yes, the physical attraction, a persistent hum he could no longer deny, was intertwined with it all, a desire for the woman he now saw so clearly. The societal warnings, Femi's pragmatic voice, roared back with renewed force. She is your employee, your maid. Crossing this line isn't just scandalous. It's potentially catastrophic. He envisioned the Lagos tabloid headlines, the sneers at the Ikoyi Club, the whispers of exploitation that would inevitably taint any relationship. The billionaire and the housemaid, a salacious narrative ripe for destruction. Her reputation would be shredded. His own, meticulously built over decades, would suffer irreparable damage. His daughter, Bisola, studying in London, how would she react? His extended family, steeped in tradition and social standing, would be apoplectic. The power imbalance wasn't just a theoretical concern. It was a canyon. Could any affection expressed by him ever be truly free from the taint of his position? Could she ever feel truly free to refuse him? The ethical horror was profound. He remembered the terror in her eyes the day he walked in on her. Pursuing her now felt like a betrayal of the very respect he was trying to build. Wasn't it just another form of leveraging his power to fulfill a desire she might not share, might feel pressured to accept? The thought sickened him. Driven by a desperate need for an anchor in this moral quagmire, Adebayo summoned Femi. Not to his office, but to the relative privacy of his Ikoyi home study late one evening. He poured his old friend a stiff drink, the silence heavy between them before he spoke, his voice rough. Femi, I need counsel. Not legal, personal. and it concerns. Chioma Nwosu, Femi, ever observant, had noted the subtle shifts in Adebayo's demeanor and the household atmosphere. His expression turned instantly grave. Adebayo, don't. It wasn't a question. It was a preemptive warning. Adebayo met his gaze, the turmoil naked in his eyes. It's not casual, Femi. It's not lust. I have developed a deep regard for her. Affection. It feels real. The admission hung in the air, stark and dangerous. Femi leaned forward, his voice low and urgent, cutting through the haze of Adebayo's conflicted emotions like a scalpel. Listen to me, my friend. Listen well. What you feel does not matter in the face of reality. She is your employee, your house help. That is the lens through which everyone will see this. Always. He ticked off points on his fingers, each one a hammer blow. 1. Scandal. The press will eviscerate you both. Billionaire exploits vulnerable Maid. That will be the headline. Her name, her picture dragged through the mud. Her life here, her family in Enugu, exposed and judged. 2. Exploitation. Even if your feelings are genuine, the power imbalance is absolute. Can she truly say no to you? Can she ever be sure her yes isn't influenced by fear of losing her job, her livelihood, her sister's future? The doubt will poison everything. 3. Social suicide. Lagos society will not embrace this. You will be ostracized, mocked. Your business relationships will suffer. Your family name will be tarnished. Bisola. Have you thought of Bisola? For her vulnerability. She has everything to lose, Adebayo. Everything. Her reputation, her future prospects, her family's standing. You risk destroying her life for a feeling. Is that love or selfishness? Femi's words were brutal, unflinching. They echoed Adebayo's own darkest fears, stripping away any veneer of romantic justification. Walk away, Adebayo, Femi finished, his voice softening slightly but no less firm. For her sake, if not your own. Preserve her dignity. Preserve your sanity. This path leads only to ruin. Adebayo slumped back in his chair, Femi's warnings a cold weight in his chest. The logic was irrefutable. The risks were monumental. The potential for harm, especially to Chioma, was immense. Yet, the thought of shutting down this burgeoning connection, of retreating back into sterile isolation, felt like suffocation. He pictured her arranging the birds of paradise, her quiet authority at the market, the fierce love in her eyes for Ada Ora, the simple warmth of the Zobo mug in his hands. Chioma, too, stood on her own dangerous edge. Adebayo's recent intensity was palpable. The lingering looks held a new depth, a warmth that both thrilled and terrified her. His deliberate efforts to connect, about art, markets, even acknowledging her nursing dream, had chipped away at her defenses. The memory of his vulnerability during the crisis, his gratitude for her small gesture, resonated deeply. She found herself replaying their conversations, noticing the subtle shifts in his expression, the rare glimpses of humor or weariness he allowed her to see. The physical pull was undeniable. A flush would rise on her neck when she sensed his gaze. The memory of his presence near her in the conservatory sent a jolt through her even now. She caught herself wondering what it would be like to touch the stern line of his jaw, to feel the strength in his hands that weren't raised in anger, but she violently shut down those thoughts. It was madness. Dangerous, destabilizing madness. Emika's crude whisper, "Maybe she's playing a long game," echoed like a curse. Was she? Was her growing regard for Adebayo just a subconscious strategy for security? The fear was paralyzing. Adeora's scholarship application deadline loomed. The fee a stark reminder of her absolute dependence on this job. A scandal wouldn't just cost her employment. It would brand her, making future work nearly impossible. Her mother's tearful warnings in Enugu rang in her ears. He will use you and throw you away. The societal gulf felt like an uncrossable ravine filled with broken glass. One evening, seeking air, she slipped out to the mansion's secluded lagoon-facing terrace. The city lights shimmered on the dark water. the same view Adebayo often contemplated. She leaned against the cool railing, the humid air heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine. The internal battle raged, the cautious voice screaming, "Run! Protect yourself! Protect Adeora!" versus the treacherous, hopeful whisper acknowledging his consistent respect, his genuine interest, the profound connection she felt sparking between them. Was it possible? Could a man like him see her as an equal? Could she ever stand beside him without feeling like an imposter, a target? As if summoned by her turmoil, the terrace door slid open. Adebayo stepped out, clearly seeking the same solace. He stopped short, seeing her. The moonlight caught the shock and then the intense, unguarded conflict in his eyes, a mirror of her own inner war. They stood frozen, meters apart, the silence thick with everything unsaid, everything feared, everything desired. The lagoon breeze stirred, carrying the scent of jasmine and danger. The edge they both stood on felt razor-sharp, the potential fall into ruin or rapture equally terrifying. Neither moved, neither spoke. The only sound was the frantic beating of two hearts dancing on the precipice of the impossible. The charged silence on the terrace stretched, thick with unspoken peril. Adebayo and Chioma remained frozen, locked in a gaze that mirrored each other's turmoil, desire warring with dread, connection battling caution. The lagoon breeze felt like the breath of fate itself, cool against skin flushed with forbidden possibilities. Adebayo broke first, not with words but with action. He took a single, deliberate step backward, breaking the magnetic pull. His expression shuddered, the raw conflict replaced by the familiar, impenetrable mask of Oga. He gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, an acknowledgement devoid of warmth, turned abruptly, and disappeared back into the mansion, the terrace door closing with a soft, definitive click behind him. The sound jolted Chioma back to reality. Relief warred with a sharp pang of disappointment. The moment of dangerous potential had passed, replaced by the cold safety of the status quo. Yet, his retreat felt less like a rejection and more like a strategic withdrawal. It left her unsettled, the echo of his conflicted gaze lingering long after she returned to her quarters. For Adebayo, Femi's warnings and the terrace precipice crystallized into a desperate resolve. He couldn't pursue Chioma under the current conditions. The power imbalance was a poison pill, dooming any genuine connection before it could begin. Femi was right. As long as she was his employee, any gesture, any word would be suspect. Her yes could never be truly free. Her no might be stifled by fear. He needed to dismantle the structure that trapped them both. Not as a prelude to courtship, but as a necessary demolition to create any possibility of ethical interaction. He spent the next 48 hours in a flurry of focused, almost clinical activity, compartmentalizing the takeover battle to address this personal crisis. He instructed Femi, not his usual HR department, to draft documents. He specified terms that were staggeringly generous. 2 years' salary as severance, a glowing written reference on his personal letterhead, a guaranteed positive verbal reference to any future employer Femi contacted on her behalf, and an additional lump sum equivalent to a year's wages labeled as a gratuity for exceptional service. It was a fortune by Chioma's standards, enough to secure Adeora's education for years and give her breathing room. It wasn't a bribe. It was an attempt to remove economic coercion from the equation. It was freedom bought and paid for. He summoned her to his study late one afternoon. The setting was deliberately formal. He sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, the documents laid out precisely before him. The atmosphere was cool, professional, devoid of the warmth that had crept into their recent interactions. Sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air, emphasizing the sterile gravity of the moment. "Chioma, please sit," he said, his voice devoid of inflection, gesturing to the chair opposite him. He saw the immediate wariness flood her eyes, her posture stiffening as she perched on the edge of the seat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked like someone awaiting sentencing. He pushed the folder across the polished wood towards her. "I have reviewed your exemplary service to this household over the past 3 years," he began, his tone flat, bureaucratic. Your dedication, efficiency, and discretion have been invaluable. The praise felt hollow, delivered in this context. However, due to recent circumstances and a reassessment of household needs, I am offering you the opportunity to resign your position, effective immediately. Chioma's breath hitched. Her face paled beneath her complexion. Resign? The word echoed like a death knell. After the terrace, after his intensity. This was the answer? Dismissal disguised as an opportunity? Panic, cold and sharp, sliced through her. Adora's scholarship fee, the rent, the future, all crumbling. Emika's sneering voice echoed. Maybe she's playing a long game. Had he decided she was a threat? Had her moment of regard on the terrace been misinterpreted as presumption? Adebayo continued, his gaze fixed on the folder, avoiding her stricken expression. Enclosed you will find details of a severance package. He listed the terms mechanically, 2 years' salary, the gratuity, the references. The amounts were astronomical to her ears. Femi Odunsi, my lawyer and a trusted associate, will handle all references and ensure a smooth transition. This package is designed to provide you with significant security and flexibility as you seek future opportunities. He finally looked up, meeting her eyes. His own were guarded, unreadable. There will be no negative repercussions. This is a clean termination with the highest commendation. Chioma stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. The generosity was bewildering, almost insulting in its abruptness. Was this guilt money for the accidental sighting? Hush money for the terrace moment? A billionaire's easy way to remove an inconvenient attraction? The fear for Adeora warred with a rising tide of indignation. He was buying her out, sweeping her away like a problem to be solved. Her 3 years of hard work, her integrity, reduced to a financial transaction. She didn't open the folder. Her hands, trembling moments before, stilled. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. The wariness was still there, but it was now fused with a spark of defiance, a fierce protectiveness over her dignity and her right to choose. Sir, she said, her voice surprisingly steady, cutting through the sterile air. May I ask, is my performance unsatisfactory? Her gaze was unwavering. Have I neglected my duties? Failed in my role? Adebayo was taken aback. He expected tears, gratitude, perhaps stunned silence. Not this quiet challenge. No, Chioma, he replied, his voice losing some of its robotic edge. Your performance has been, as stated, exemplary. This is not a dismissal for cause. Then, she continued, her voice gaining strength, is the household being downsized? Are other staff receiving similar opportunities? She knew they weren't. Kola had mentioned hiring a new junior gardener just yesterday. No, Adebayo admitted, shifting slightly in his chair. The clinical script was unraveling. This offer is specific to you, Chioma. It is a recognition of the unique circumstances. He couldn't bring himself to articulate the real reason, the power imbalance, his feelings, the societal minefield. Chioma absorbed this. Unique circumstances, the accident, his attention, the terrace. Her shoulders straightened. The panic receded, replaced by a cold clarity. This wasn't about her work. This was about him, about his discomfort, his attempt to control the narrative, to remove a complication from his meticulously ordered world with a wave of his billionaire hand. The immense sum was a gilded cage, offered as freedom. Felt like an erasure. She pushed the folder back towards him. Just an inch, but the gesture was potent. Thank you for the generous assessment of my service, sir, she said, her tone formal but laced with an undercurrent of steel. However, I have not sought other employment. I value my position here. I am capable of performing my duties to the standard you require. She held his gaze, the defiance now clear. Unless you are terminating my employment without cause, against my will, I decline the offer to resign. Silence descended, heavier than before. Adebayo stared at her, stunned. He had offered her an escape route, financial security beyond her dreams, a clean break from a situation fraught with peril for her. He had expected relief, perhaps resistance overcome by the sheer magnitude of the offer. He had not anticipated a flat, dignified refusal. She wasn't grasping at the money. She was asserting her right to stay, to choose. She was calling his bluff. Down the hall, unseen behind the barely cracked kitchen door, Mama IBG stood frozen, a tray forgotten in her hands. She had brought refreshments, sensing the gravity of the summons. She had heard enough. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. Chioma had just turned down a fortune, not out of greed but out of pride, principle. Mama IBG couldn't fathom it. Adebayo slowly closed the folder. The clinical plan lay in ruins. Chioma's quiet defiance, her assertion of her value on her own terms, was a revelation more profound than any art observation or market knowledge. She wasn't just resilient. She possessed an unassailable core of dignity he hadn't fully appreciated. She wasn't a problem to be bought off. She was a woman claiming her agency. I see, he managed, his voice rough. He looked at her, truly looked, seeing not just the maid, not just the object of his conflicted desire, but a person of formidable will. Very well, Chioma. Your position remains. The offer. He gestured to the folder. Stands. Should you reconsider in the future? Thank you, sir, Chioma said, rising smoothly. Her heart was pounding, but her posture was regal. Will that be all? Yes. You may go. She turned and walked out, not fleeing, but departing with measured steps. She didn't look at Mama IBJI's shadowed form. She walked down the hall, the weight of the refused fortune and the asserted choice settling on her shoulders. She hadn't won anything tangible, but she had reclaimed something vital. Control. The gambit had failed. Adebayo hadn't freed her. She had freed herself from the assumption that she would be bought off. The game, whatever it was, had just entered a new, uncharted phase, and Chioma Nwosu had proven she was no mere pawn. The unresolved tension after Chioma's defiant refusal of the resignation offer hung heavy in the Ikoyi mansion, a silent stalemate. Adebayo retreated into the demands of the ongoing takeover battle, his interactions with Chioma reverting to a brittle, ultra-professional formality, though the undercurrent of awareness remained potent. Chioma maintained her impeccable service, her posture radiating a newly fortified dignity, yet the air crackled with unspoken questions. It was against this backdrop that the Ikoyi Club event unfolded, a collision of their private turmoil with the harsh glare of Lagos high society. The annual charity gala for the preservation of Lagos heritage was one of the events on the social calendar. Held at the exclusive, colonnaded Ikoyi Club overlooking the lagoon, it was a sea of designer gowns, bespoke suits, glittering jewels, and the low hum of immense wealth and influence. Adebayo, as a major donor and board member, was expected not just to attend but to host a table. This year, the logistics were unusually complex, involving the display of several fragile historical artifacts on loan. Trusting only Chioma's meticulousness, he requested, not ordered, her presence in a strictly professional capacity to oversee the setup and ensure the priceless items were handled and displayed flawlessly. Chioma arrived earlier with Tund in the staff car, dressed in her neatest, darkest uniform, a subtle symbol of her role. Stepping into the opulent chaos of the pre-gala setup was like entering another world. Polished marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers. Liveried staff moved with silent efficiency. The air thrummed with the clink of fine china and the sharp commands of wealthy matrons directing floral arrangements. Chioma immediately set to work, her quiet authority cutting through the noise. She coordinated with the club's event manager, directed porters with precise instructions on artifact placement under museum-grade lighting, and meticulously checked security seals. She was in her element, competent, focused, indispensable. As the first guests began to trickle in, the atmosphere shifted. Elegantly dressed men and women, accustomed to staff being invisible extensions of the decor, began to register Chioma's presence. Her uniform marked her as service, yet her calm command and direct interaction with the event manager seemed to blur lines, creating subtle friction. Adebayo arrived, instantly enveloped by a swarm of well-wishers and associates. He navigated the room with practiced ease, but his gaze constantly sought Chioma, tracking her efficient movements near the artifact display. He saw the first snub, Mrs. Olabisi Williams, a society doyen known for her waspish tongue, needing directions to the powder room. She bypassed 3 club waiters and imperiously summoned Chioma. "You, girl, where is the ladies' lounge?" Her tone was dismissive, not even deeming Chioma worthy of eye contact. Chioma, mid-conversation with a technician, paused, turned, and gave precise, polite directions. Mrs. Williams swept away without acknowledgement. Moments later, a group of young, champagne-sipping socialites clustered near the display Chioma was finalizing. Their loud conversation about a recent Dubai shopping spree grated against the historical setting. "Honestly," Uche, one drawled, swirling her flute, "why do they even let the help touch these things? They probably don't even know what they're looking at." Her gaze slid dismissively over Chioma, adjusting a spotlight. Another giggled, "Probably thinks it's just fancy junk." Hope she washed her hands. Their laughter, light and cruel, carried clearly. Chioma didn't flinch. Her hands remained steady as she adjusted the angle of a 19th-century Benin bronze, but Adebayo, watching from across the room, saw the subtle tightening of her jaw, the slight straightening of her spine. A slow burn ignited in his chest. The final straw involved Chief Bayo Adekunle, a portly industrialist known for his bluster. He approached the display, peering closely at an intricate Yoruba carving. "Fascinating," he boomed, then turned, spotting Chioma nearby. "You, Maid, fetch me another champagne, and be quick about it." He thrust his empty glass towards her, expecting immediate obedience, his attention already back on the carving. Chioma was holding a fragile glass display case lid. Setting it down carefully took precedence. The slight delay was enough. Chief Adekunle noticed her focus wasn't instantly on him. "Are you deaf, girl?" he snapped, his voice sharpening, drawing glances. "I said champagne." Adebayo saw it all. The condescension, the casual cruelty, the utter disregard for her personhood. He saw Chioma take a steadying breath, her professionalism a thin shield against public humiliation. The slow burn erupted into white-hot fury. This wasn't just rudeness. It was a microcosm of the world that would condemn any connection between them, a world that saw Chioma only as the help, invisible until needed, unworthy of basic courtesy, let alone respect or affection. He moved, not hastily, but with deliberate, powerful strides that cut through the crowd like a warship. He reached Chioma and Chief Adekunle just as Chioma, her expression perfectly composed but eyes burning with suppressed emotion, reached for the empty glass. "Chief Adekunle," Adebayo's voice rang out, clear, cold, and authoritative, silencing the nearby chatter. He placed himself subtly between Chioma and the chief. "I see you're admiring the easy soapstone piece. Remarkable craftsmanship, isn't it?" His tone was polite but held an unmistakable edge. Chief Adekunle, startled, blinked. "Ah, Adebayo. Yes, fascinating. Just needed a refill." He gestured vaguely with the glass. Adebayo ignored the glass. He turned slightly towards Chioma, who stood frozen, her hand still half extended. "Ms. Nwosu," he said, his voice shifting, losing the icy edge, gaining a resonant warmth that carried. He used her surname formally, respectfully. "Your expertise has been invaluable in preserving these artifacts tonight. The lighting on the Benin bronze is particularly effective. Chief Adekunle and I were just discussing the easy piece. Perhaps you could elaborate on its significance for him, given your meticulous research for this display." He looked directly at her, his gaze steady, supportive, inviting her into the conversation as an equal authority. The effect was seismic. A ripple of surprise passed through the onlookers. "Ms. Nwosu, expertise? Elaborate?" Chief Adekunle's mouth opened, then closed, his face flushing with confusion and dawning embarrassment. The socialites who had mocked her exchanged stunned glances. Chioma, for a split second, was utterly speechless. The public humiliation had been a physical weight. Now, Adebayo's public validation felt like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. She met his gaze, seeing not just protection, but absolute respect and a challenge. Show them. Drawing on every ounce of her composure and the genuine knowledge she had acquired preparing for the event, she turned to Chief Atakunal. "Certainly, sir," she said, her voice calm, clear, and carrying. "The easy soapstone figures, Chief, are unique to Kwara State. They date back centuries and represent one of the largest collections of stone figures in Africa south of the Sahara. Their purpose remains debated: ancestral veneration, community guardians. What's particularly fascinating is the variety of postures." She spoke for a minute, concise, informative, her passion for the preservation of heritage momentarily overriding her discomfort. Chief Atakunal listened, stunned into silence, then mumbled, "Ah, yes, very, educational." He quickly excused himself, melting into the crowd, his empty glass forgotten. Adebayo didn't smile, but the warmth remained in his eyes as he looked at Chioma. "Thank you, Ms. Nwosu. Your dedication is crucial tonight." He gave her a slight, respectful nod, then turned to greet another approaching guest, seamlessly re-entering the social fray. But the message had been delivered with the force of a thunderclap. The whispers started instantly, buzzing like angry hornets. "Did you hear?" Adebayo called her Ms. Nwosu, publicly corrected Bayo, treated her like an expert. "What on earth is going on?" Chioma stood rooted for a moment, the heat of humiliation replaced by a different kind of heat, the flush of vindication, the shock of his unwavering support. She hadn't just been defended, she had been elevated. He hadn't chastised the chief for her. He had forced the chief and everyone watching to acknowledge her value, her knowledge, her presence as a professional. It was a declaration far more potent than words of affection could ever be. As she resumed her duties, head held high, the sidelong glances she received were no longer dismissive, but filled with stunned curiosity and a dawning, grudging respect. Adebayo Adeola hadn't just drawn a line. He had publicly shattered the lens of the help and demanded the world see Chioma Nwosu. The Ikoyi Club would never forget it. Neither would Chioma. Weeks bled into months after the Ikoyi Club earthquake. The takeover battle, while not fully resolved, had stabilized, a tense ceasefire holding. Adebayo's decisive stand had sent shockwaves through Lagos society, the whispers morphing from scandalous speculation to wary curiosity. Within the mansion, the air remained thick with unresolved tension, but the nature of it had shifted. The icy avoidance was gone, replaced by a charged, watchful quiet. Chioma moved with her usual grace, but her gaze, when it met Adebayo's, held a new depth, no longer just wariness, but a complex tapestry of confusion, lingering shock from the club, and a dawning, terrifying awareness of the precipice they stood upon. He saw it too, mirrored in his own turmoil. Femi's warning still echoed, a grim counterpoint, but the image of Chioma holding her ground against Chief Atakunal, the quiet dignity under fire, solidified his resolve. The gambit had failed. The club had been a declaration. Now only honesty remained, however perilous. He chose the terrace, the place of their first charged encounter, the place where city lights met lagoon darkness, a liminal space mirroring their own uncertain ground. He waited until deep night, the mansion silent, the only sounds the distant hum of Lagos and the rhythmic chirping of crickets. Moonlight silvered the potted palms and cast long, dramatic shadows. He didn't summon her. That felt too much like a command. Instead, he asked Kola, with unusual gravity, to inform Chioma he wished to speak with her on the terrace, if she was available. The if was crucial. Chioma received the message in her quarters, her heart instantly accelerating. The terrace, the place of perilous possibility. Every instinct screamed caution. The club incident had been a shield. This felt like stepping out from behind it. Adora's scholarship was secured, the fee paid with her own savings and a small, unexpected bursary, easing one pressure but not the others. The societal gulf still yawned. Yet, the memory of his unwavering support, the respect in his eyes when he called her Ms. Nwosu, the profound fatigue shed glimpsed in him, it pulled her with a force stronger than fear. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she smoothed her simple, neat dress, not her uniform, a conscious choice, and walked towards the terrace. He stood near the railing, silhouetted against the moonlit lagoon, his back to her. He didn't turn immediately as she stepped through the sliding door, the warm, jasmine-scented night air enveloping her. He seemed deep in thought or perhaps gathering courage. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of everything unsaid. Chioma, he finally spoke, his voice low, rough with uncharacteristic vulnerability. He turned slowly. Moonlight caught the stark lines of his face, the shadows under his eyes, the tension held in his jaw. He looked less like the invincible billionaire and more like a man braced for judgment. "Thank you for coming." He gestured towards a wrought iron bench, not his usual chair. "Please sit." "Not as staff. Not tonight." The deliberate dismantling of hierarchy was palpable. Chioma sat, perched on the edge of the bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, every sense alert. He remained standing, facing her but keeping a respectful distance, his gaze fixed on the shimmering water. Since that regrettable day months ago, he began, the words seeming to cost him effort, "My perception of you, of this world, has fractured, irrevocably." He paused, swallowing hard. "I owe you an apology, Chioma. Not just for the intrusion, the violation of your privacy that day, though that shame will always be with me, but for a deeper failing." He finally looked at her, his eyes holding hers in the silvery light, intense and utterly sincere. "I apologize for truly seeing you only after that accident forced my eyes open. For 3 years you were an efficient function, a uniform. I inhabited the same space, benefited from your skill, your dedication, and I was blind to the remarkable woman beneath." Chioma felt the breath catch in her throat. The raw honesty was disarming. She remained silent, listening, her heart pounding against her ribs. "I saw your strength," he continued, his voice gaining a quiet intensity. "Not just physical, but the strength that anchors others. Neka, Mama Ibeg, your sister. I saw your intelligence, solving problems in the kitchen, understanding art in a way that humbled me, researching heritage like a scholar. I saw your compassion, in a cup of zobo and a proverb offered in my darkest hour." He took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. "I saw your dignity, standing tall under the condescension at the club, refusing to be bought off when I offered you an escape. Chioma, I have come to admire you profoundly. These feelings," he faltered, searching for the right words, "they go far beyond respect for an employee. They are feelings of deep regard, affection." The word hung in the night air, fragile and momentous. Affection. Chioma felt a jolt, part fear, part undeniable thrill. The moonlight seemed to amplify the vulnerability etched on his face, the sheer courage it took for this powerful man to stand before his maid and confess. He didn't stop. He stepped fully into the peril head outlined to Femi. "I understand the complexities, Chioma. I see them clearer than ever. The power imbalance, it is a chasm. My position, your position, societal expectations, the potential for gossip that could destroy your reputation. The risks for you are immense, terrifyingly so." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I would never ask you to jeopardize your position or your dignity. I would never want you to feel pressured, obligated, or unsafe." He took another breath, the most crucial one. "So I offer you a choice. A real choice with no hidden strings, no consequence from me." He held her gaze, his eyes pleading for understanding. "If you wish me to stop speaking now, if you wish to leave my employ, not as a resignation you refuse, but as a free choice, you may do so. Tonight, with the severance package, the glowing reference, Femi's support in finding a new position far from here. You can walk away, Chioma Nwosu, with your future secure and my deepest gratitude for your service. I will understand immediately, without question, and you will never hear of this again." The silence that followed was absolute. The crickets seemed to hold their breath. The lagoon shimmered, waiting. Chioma felt the immensity of the offer. Genuine freedom, safety, security for Adaora, all laid at her feet. An escape from the dangerous precipice. Or, Adebayo continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, filled with a desperate, fragile hope, if there is even the slightest possibility, the faintest glimmer, that you might consider knowing me not as Oga, but as Adebayo. If you might allow me the chance to court you properly, respectfully, openly, as equals in the eyes of those who truly matter. He paused, the vulnerability laid bare. Then I would ask for that chance. To show you the man beneath the title. To build something real across this impossible divide. He fell silent, the confession complete. The weight of the world, the risks, the potential for heartbreak, hung suspended between them under the watchful moon. He had laid bare his soul, offered her absolute freedom, and then, with breathtaking audacity, offered her his heart. The terrace, once a place of charged glances and hasty retreats, now held the most profound question of their lives. Chioma sat frozen, the echo of his words, affection, regard, court you properly, equals reverberating through her, shattering old walls and exposing the raw, terrifying possibility of a future she had never dared to imagine. The choice, truly and completely, was hers. The weight of Adebayo's confession pressed down on Chioma like the humid Lagos night itself. Thick, inescapable, electric. The moonlight carved sharp contrasts across his face, highlighting the raw vulnerability in his eyes, the tension in his clenched jaw. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the rhythmic chirping of crickets and the distant hum of the city. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, trembled slightly. She could feel the rapid pulse in her throat, the dryness of her mouth. Every instinct honed by years of survival screamed at her to retreat, to take the escape he offered, the severance, the references, the clean break, to protect herself from the storm of scandal, the whispers that would follow, the judgment that would brand her an opportunist or worse. The image of Amika's sneering face floated before her. Maybe she's playing a long game. Her mother's tearful voice echoed in her memory. He will use you and throw you away. And yet, the memory of his unwavering support at the Ikoyi Club burned brighter. The way he had stepped between her and Chief Adekunle, not with paternalistic pity, but with respect, demanding the world see her as he did. The quiet moments, the shared appreciation of art, his genuine interest in her market knowledge, the way his eyes had softened when she spoke of Adaora, the Zobo left in his darkest hour, and the profound gratitude in his gaze when he realized it was from her. Most of all, the choice he had just laid at her feet. Not an ultimatum, not a demand wrapped in velvet, but true, terrifying freedom. He was offering her an out, no consequences, no resentment. That alone spoke volumes about the man beneath the title. She took a slow, shuddering breath, her mind racing. The risks were undeniable. The societal gulf was vast. But the man before her, the one who had dismantled his own power to give her agency, was real. The connection between them, forged in quiet moments and public trials, was undeniable. Chioma lifted her gaze to meet his. The fear was still there, coiled tight in her chest, but beneath it, something else stirred. A fragile, daring hope. Adebayo, she began, testing the name on her tongue. The first time she had ever addressed him so informally. Felt foreign, dangerous, exhilarating. His breath hitched at the sound, his entire body tensing as if bracing for a blow. She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper but clear in the stillness. That day, in my room after the storm, I was terrified, not just because you saw me, but because in that moment I had no control. My privacy, my dignity, my choice, it was all stripped away. She held his gaze, watching the flicker of pain and guilt in his eyes. But these past months, you have given that back to me, piece by piece, not through grand gestures but by seeing me, by valuing my thoughts, my skills, my... She hesitated, then forged ahead. My heart. Adebayo's hands, which had been clenched at his sides, relaxed slightly. His eyes searched hers, wary but hopeful. Chioma straightened her shoulders, the decision crystallizing within her. You asked for a chance to court me properly, respectfully. She took another breath, the words heavy with consequence. Respectfully, Adebayo, I would like to know that man better too. The effect was instantaneous. Adebayo exhaled sharply, as if he had been holding his breath for years. His eyes shimmered with something perilously close to tears, his stern features softening with a relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, as if memorizing the contours of her face in the moonlight, the weight of her words settling between them. Then, slowly, deliberately, he closed the distance between them and knelt before her. Not in supplication, but in a gesture of equality, bringing himself to her eye level. He reached out, hesitated, then gently took one of her trembling hands in his. His palm was warm, his grip firm but not possessive. Chioma Nwosu, he said, her name a reverent whisper. I will spend every day proving worthy of this trust. The promise hung in the air between them, fragile yet unbreakable. The terrace, once a place of fraught tension, now bore witness to something extraordinary. The first fragile step across an impossible divide. Chioma felt the warmth of his hand seep into hers, the solid reality of his presence grounding her. The fear hadn't vanished, it likely never would entirely, but it was no longer alone. It was joined by something far more dangerous, far more exhilarating. The terrifying, exhilarating thrill of a leap of faith taken. And as the moon cast its silver light over them, Chioma allowed herself, for the first time, to imagine what might lie on the other side. The air crackled with a different kind of tension in the days following the terrace confession. The unspoken question had been answered, a path chosen, but the reality of stepping onto it was fraught with practicalities and palpable awkwardness. The mansion, once a stage for employer and employee, now felt like a minefield of shifting roles and watchful eyes. Chioma initiated the necessary first step. She requested a formal meeting in Adebayo's study, not on the intimate terrace. Dressed in her uniform, posture impeccably professional, she stood before his desk. Sir, she began, the formal address feeling strange now but necessary for this act. I wish to formally tender my resignation, effective immediately. Adebayo, expecting this, nodded gravely. He pushed a folder towards her, the same one Shed refused weeks ago, now updated. The terms remain, Chioma. Severance, gratuity, Femi's support. But this time he met her gaze, warmth softening the formality. It is your choice. Freely made. It is, she affirmed, a flicker of pride in her eyes. I choose to leave. She signed the documents with a steady hand, the scratch of the pen echoing in the quiet room. It wasn't just leaving a job. It was severing the last formal tether of their old dynamic. A chapter closed. Leaving the mansion that afternoon felt surreal. Tun drove her, not in the staff car, but in Adebayo's less conspicuous Range Rover, to a secure, modern apartment building in Lekki Phase 1. Adebayo had insisted, via Femi, on facilitating a comfortable, independent transition. It's not a gift, Femi had explained pragmatically, handing her the keys. Consider it a practical solution while you secure your own place. The severance allows you that freedom soon. This is merely a bridge. The apartment was tastefully furnished, spacious, light-filled, and utterly impersonal. It screamed temporary luxury. Chioma walked through the empty rooms, her footsteps echoing. The silence was profound, unsettling after the constant hum of the mansion. Freedom felt vast and strangely lonely. She placed her single suitcase in the bedroom, the reality sinking in. She was no longer Chioma, the head housemaid. She was Chioma Nwosu, unemployed, standing on the precipice of something terrifying and exhilarating with a billionaire. Later that evening, a discreet knock announced Adebayo. He stood in the hallway, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. Gone was the power suit. He wore dark chinos and a simple linen shirt. He held a single, elegant orchid in a small pot, not cut flowers. A token, he said, offering it. For your new space. Low maintenance. A small, thoughtful gesture, acknowledging her independence. He didn't cross the threshold. May I come in? He asked formally. Of course, Chioma replied, stepping aside, her heart pounding. His presence filled the neutral space, making it feel suddenly charged. He looked around, his expression unreadable. "Is it suitable?" he asked, a hint of concern in his voice. "It's beautiful. More than I need, but—" "Thank you for the bridge," she said, echoing Femi's term. He nodded, his gaze lingering on her face. "The silence takes getting used to, doesn't it? After the mansion." "It does," she admitted, a small smile touching her lips. "It's very quiet." An awkward pause stretched. The easy rhythm of their terrace conversation was gone, replaced by the tangible reality of being alone together in a private space, no longer bound by roles. What did they talk about? How did they be? "Would you?" Adebayo cleared his throat. "Would you allow me to take you to dinner tomorrow? Somewhere neutral, public but discreet." He looked earnest, almost nervous. "Our first proper step?" Chioma felt a flutter of anxiety mixed with anticipation. "Yes," she said. "I would like that." The chosen venue was Yellow Chili in Lekki, upscale but not intimidatingly so, known for its sophisticated take on Nigerian cuisine. Adebayo arrived to pick her up precisely on time. The drive was quiet, the air thick with unspoken tension. He opened the car door for her, a gesture that felt both courteous and strangely formal. Inside the restaurant, the maitre d' recognized Adebayo immediately but showed no outward reaction beyond professional courtesy. They were shown to a secluded corner table, partially screened by lush potted plants. Soft jazz played, and the warm lighting created an intimate yet public atmosphere. The awkwardness descended like a fog. Chioma, used to serving at such tables, felt acutely self-conscious sitting at one, especially opposite Adebayo. The menu felt like a foreign document. What was appropriate to order? What wouldn't seem greedy or presumptuous? Adebayo, usually decisive, seemed similarly adrift. The grilled tilapia with plantain mash is excellent here," he offered, noticing her hesitation. "Thank you," Chioma said, grateful for the suggestion. "That sounds lovely." She ordered the same. The silence between courses was agonizing. They made stilted small talk. The weather, the restaurant's ambience, the traffic felt forced, artificial. Chioma's hands felt clammy. Adebayo fiddled with his cutlery. The weight of expectation, the fear of judgment, real or imagined, the sheer novelty of it all was paralyzing. Then the food arrived. The aroma of perfectly grilled fish, spicy jollof rice, and fried plantain filled the air, familiar, comforting sense of home. Chioma took her first bite, the flavors exploding on her tongue. Instinctively, she made a small sound of appreciation. "Oh, this is delicious. The suya spice is perfect." Adebayo watched her, a genuine smile breaking through his tension for the first time that evening. "It is, isn't it?" He took a bite of his own. "Reminds me of the roadside grill near my university hostel in Ife. Never quite as good anywhere else, but this comes close." He shared a brief, self-deprecating anecdote about burning plantains over a makeshift grill. The shared experience of the food, the connection to a common Nigerian memory, broke the ice. The conversation began to flow more naturally. They talked about food memories, Chioma's mother's legendary ofensala, Adebayo's failed attempts at making moin moin as a young bachelor. They cautiously ventured beyond food. Chioma spoke of her nervousness about finding a new direction, perhaps revisiting her nursing dream. Adebayo spoke of the relief of the stabilized business situation, the lingering fatigue. They avoided the elephant in the room with them. Their future, but a tentative connection, a fragile ease, began to replace the awkwardness. As Adebayo drove her back to the apartment, the silence was different, comfortable, reflective. He walked her to her door, stopping a respectful distance away. "Thank you for tonight, Chioma," he said, his voice warm, despite the initial navigation issues. "Thank you for dinner, Adebayo," she replied, meeting his eyes. The tilapia truly was excellent. A shared smile, acknowledging the breakthrough over jollof rice. He didn't try to kiss her. He simply took her hand, lifted it gently, and pressed a soft, chaste kiss to her knuckles. It was a gesture from another era, laden with respect and burgeoning affection. Good night, Chioma. Good night, Adebayo. Inside her quiet apartment, Chioma leaned against the door, the ghost of his kiss lingering on her skin. The awkwardness had been real, the fear palpable. But so had the shared laugh over burnt plantains, the warmth in his eyes when she spoke of her dreams, the simple comfort of his hand on hers. The new terrain was vast, unmapped, and fraught with challenges she could barely fathom. But as she touched the spot where his lips had brushed her skin, Chioma Nwosu knew, with a certainty that chased away the lingering fear, that she was exactly where she had chosen to be. The journey, however daunting, had truly begun. The tentative peace of Chioma's Lekki apartment and the fragile connection forged over grilled tilapia felt like a distant dream as Adebayo boarded his private jet bound for London. The purpose? A long-planned visit to his daughter, Bisola, studying for her master's in international law. The timing, however, was fraught. The Lagos whispers, amplified by the Ikoyi Club incident, had undoubtedly reached London's connected Nigerian circles. Adebayo knew he couldn't delay the conversation. Bisola deserved honesty, not tabloid headlines. He found her in a chic Notting Hill cafe, immersed in case files, her sleek braids pulled back, radiating the focused intelligence he admired. Her smile upon seeing him was warm, but it faltered slightly as she took in his unusually somber expression. "Baba, you look tired. Is the takeover still giving you hell?" She used the affectionate Yoruba term for father, a habit from childhood. Over fragrant mint tea, Adebayo steered the conversation towards lighter topics, her studies, her flatmates, London life. But the unspoken tension simmered. Finally, as dusk painted the London skyline in hues of gray, he took a deep breath. "Bisola, there's something important I need to discuss. Something personal." Her bright eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the gravity. "Okay, shoot, you're worrying me, Baba." "Concerns." Chioma Nwosu. He saw immediate recognition flash in her eyes, followed by confusion. "My former head housemaid. Chioma? The quiet, efficient one? What about her? Did she leave? Is she okay?" Bisola's concern seemed genuine, colored by distant memories of Chioma's quiet competence during her visits home. Adebayo chose his words carefully, yet directly. "She resigned. Voluntarily. But my relationship with her has changed, Bisola." He met her gaze squarely, bracing for impact. "I have developed deep feelings for her. We are exploring a relationship." The silence that followed was absolute. Bisola stared at him, her teacup frozen halfway to her lips. Confusion morphed into disbelief, then rapidly ignited into incredulous anger. "What?" The word was a sharp crack in the hushed cafe. "Baba, are you serious? Chioma? The maid?" Her voice dropped to a furious whisper, laced with visceral disgust. "Have you lost your mind?" "Bisola," Adebayo began, his own temper flaring at the tone. "No," she cut him off, her eyes blazing. "How could you? After Mum? Replacing her with help? It's disgusting. It's pathetic." The words tumbled out, raw and hurtful. "Is this some midlife crisis? Loneliness driving you to pick the nearest available woman, regardless of what she is?" "Enough!" Adebayo's voice, though low, carried the full weight of his authority, silencing her momentarily. A few nearby patrons glanced over. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "You will not speak of Chioma that way. You know nothing about her, Bisola. Nothing beyond the uniform she wore in our home. She wore that uniform for a reason." "Baba," Bisola shot back, tears of anger and betrayal welling. "She was an employee. There's a line, a massive, uncrossable line. What will people say? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about me?" Her voice cracked. "My friends, their fathers date supermodels or heiresses, not housemaids. It's humiliating." Adebayo felt the sting of her words, the societal shame she projected onto herself. "Since when do you care so deeply about the gossip of shallow people, Bisola?" He countered, his voice tight. "You studying international law, championing human rights? Does dignity, intelligence, strength of character only belong to those born into privilege?" Or can it be found in someone who worked tirelessly to build a future for her sister? Bisola flinched but held his gaze stubbornly. Don't twist this, Baba. This isn't about social justice. This is about you and a wildly inappropriate relationship. It's about exploiting a power imbalance. She depended on you. How can her yes possibly be free? Did you buy her off with that ridiculous severance package I heard whispers about? Her accusation hit a nerve. Adebayo's expression hardened. She refused the severance package initially, Bisola. Point blank, when I first offered it weeks ago before any of this. She valued her job, her integrity. She stood in my study and told me she was capable and chose to stay. He let that sink in, seeing the flicker of surprise in her eyes. The financial security I offered later was precisely to remove that imbalance, to give her true freedom to choose. And her choice, he emphasized, was not to walk away with a fortune, but to take a chance on knowing me. On Adebayo, stripped of the title and the bank account. Bisola looked stunned. The wind momentarily knocked out of her righteous anger. She refused the money? Yes, Adebayo stated firmly. She possesses a dignity and strength you clearly haven't bothered to imagine. She faced down societal scorn at the Ikoyi Club with more grace than many supermodels or heiresses you admire could muster. He softened his tone slightly, seeing her struggle. I loved your mother with all my heart, Bisola. That love doesn't vanish. It shapes who I am. But life isn't static. Chioma isn't a replacement. She's a completely different person who has walked into my life and challenged everything I thought I knew. She sees me, not just the billionaire, and I see her, truly see the remarkable woman she is. He reached across the table, covering her clenched hand with his. I understand your shock, your anger, your fear of gossip, but I need you to try and understand me, not as Baba, the infallible patriarch, but as a man who found an unexpected connection. I need you to trust that I haven't lost my mind or my integrity. And I need you, his voice grew thick with emotion, not to shut her out before you even meet her. Bisola pulled her hand away slowly, looking down at her cooling tea. The furious tears had subsided, replaced by a storm of confusion, lingering resentment, and dawning, uncomfortable curiosity. The image of Chioma, efficient, silent, almost invisible in her memories, clashed violently with the woman her father described. Strong, dignified, principled enough to refuse a fortune. A lot, Baba, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Feels like a betrayal. Of Mum. Of everything. She looked up, her eyes searching his face. You really care for her? This isn't just loneliness or guilt. With all my heart, in a way I didn't think possible again, Adebayo affirmed quietly. And it terrifies me as much as it fulfills me. The path ahead is fraught, Bisola. I know that, but I need you in my corner, even if you don't agree yet. Bisola was silent for a long time, the London dusk deepening outside. Finally, she took a shaky breath. I don't understand it. I may never fully understand it, and I'm still angry and embarrassed. She met his eyes, a flicker of her own fierce intelligence surfacing. But I believe you believe it, and I believe you wouldn't jeopardize everything lightly. She paused, a hard edge returning. But if she hurts you, Baba, if this is some elaborate game, it's not a game, Bisola, Adebayo interrupted gently but firmly. She nodded curtly. Fine, then. I want to meet her, properly, not as the help, but as the woman who has turned your world upside down. On neutral ground, just the three of us. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall. A door, however reluctantly, nudged open. Later, back in his luxurious hotel suite overlooking Hyde Park, Adebayo poured himself a finger of whiskey. The conversation had drained him. Bisola's initial fury, her cutting words, echoed painfully. But beneath the hurt, he felt a profound sense of relief. The first, most crucial battle was fought. The bridge to his daughter, while fragile and singed at the edges, still stood. He looked out at the twinkling city lights, thinking of Chioma back in Lagos, navigating her own storms. The family firestorm had begun, but the first ember of understanding, however small, had been kindled. The real test would come when worlds collided face to face. The relative sanctuary of Chioma's Lekki apartment and the fragile bridge built with Adaora felt like distant oases upon their return to Lagos. The city itself seemed to hum with a different frequency, a low, insistent buzz of judgment. The whispers, once confined to hushed corners of the Adeola mansion or speculative chatter at the Ikoyi Club, had metastasized. The Billionaire and the Maid saga was no longer a rumor. It was Lagos society's favorite scandal, dissected over champagne flutes and suya skewers with equal relish. The first public outing after Enugu was a charity art auction at the prestigious Eco Hotel ballroom. Adebayo, determined to present a united front, escorted Chioma. She wore a simple, elegant navy dress Adebayo had insisted on purchasing, feeling simultaneously exposed and armored. The moment they stepped into the glittering throng, the atmosphere shifted. A visible ripple went through the crowd. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads turned, not subtly. Eyes, curious, disdainful, pitying, voyeuristic, raked over Chioma. Adebayo kept her hand firmly tucked in the crook of his arm, his posture radiating icy authority. He greeted acquaintances with his usual firm handshake, introducing Chioma with deliberate calm. "Good evening, Senator. May I introduce Chioma Nwosu?" "Chioma, Senator Adewale." The senator's smile was tight, his eyes flickering over Chioma with undisguised assessment before offering a perfunctory nod. "Ms. Nwosu." The lack of warmth was palpable. Chioma felt the scrutiny like physical heat. She kept her chin up, her smile polite but neutral, channeling the composure shed used at the Ikoyi Club. But it was harder here, surrounded. She overheard snippets as Adebayo guided her towards their table. "The actual maid? I heard it was just a fling. Brazen, bringing her here. Poor bimp must be spinning in her grave. Clearly ambitious, look at her." A woman Chioma recognized as the wife of a banking magnate deliberately turned her back as they passed, engaging in overly loud conversation with her companion. Finding their seats was an ordeal. Adebayo's usual circle of close associates, Femi included, greeted them with varying degrees of strained politeness. Others, particularly wives and social climbers, offered only the coldest nods or pretended not to see Chioma at all. The seating arrangement itself felt like a subtle snub. They were placed at Adebayo's usual prominent table, but flanked by people known for their conservative views and sharp tongues. Dinner was an exercise in exquisite torture. Polite questions directed solely at Adebayo about business or mutual acquaintances, while Chioma sat beside him, acknowledged only when absolutely necessary, her presence a silent, uncomfortable elephant in the room. She ate little, her stomach churning. The auction itself provided little respite. When Adebayo bid aggressively on a striking Njideka, a Keneally Crosby piece, whispers erupted, buying her favor. Compensation, clearly. Chioma focused on the vibrant artwork, trying to shut out the noise, but the humiliation burned. The ride home was thick with tension. Adebayo's jaw was clenched, fury radiating from him in waves. Ignorant, petty vipers, he finally growled, slamming his palm lightly on the steering wheel. Their small-mindedness is astounding. Chioma stared out at the neon-lit Lekki streets. "It's not just pettiness, Adebayo," she said quietly, her voice tired. "It's the natural order in their eyes. I broke it, stepped out of my lane. They can't compute it. To them, it'll always be the maid who got above herself." He reached over, taking her hand. "You are above them, Chioma, in every way that matters." The public snubs weren't confined to grand events. A trip to the upscale Palms shopping mall for Chioma to find interview clothes became another gauntlet. Well-dressed women pointedly steered their children away. Shop assistants, initially polite, grew subtly colder, less helpful, once they recognized her, or more likely, once they connected her to the tabloid photos now circulating. One particularly bold article in City Scoop bore the headline, "From Dustpan to Diamonds? The Maid Who Captured a Billionaire's Heart or Wallet." It featured a grainy, unflattering photo of Chioma leaving the mansion months ago, juxtaposed with a recent paparazzi shot outside her apartment building. The article was rife with innuendo, anonymous sources questioning her motives, her background, and speculating wildly about Adebayo's state of mind. Chioma read it online, sitting alone in her apartment, feeling physically ill. The comments section was worse, a cesspool of vitriol, envy, racist and classist slurs, and crude speculation. Gold digger. She must be a witch. Typical Igbo hustle. He'll tire of her soon enough. Bet she was his bed warmer long before she resigned. The anonymity emboldened the cruelty. She closed the laptop, trembling, the digital hatred feeling like a physical assault. Adebayo was livid. Femi was dispatched, threatening legal action against Cityscoop for defamation and invasion of privacy, forcing a retraction, buried on page 8, and the removal of the most egregious comments. But the damage was done. The narrative was set in the public consciousness. The social isolation extended beyond events. Invitations that once flooded Adebayo's desk dwindled. Phone calls from certain associates became less frequent. A planned business dinner with a crucial potential partner from South Africa was abruptly cancelled with a vague excuse. Femi later heard whispers the partner's wife had objected strenuously to being seated near that woman. One rainy afternoon, seeking solace, Chioma visited a small art gallery in Victoria Island showing contemporary Nigerian artists. She was engrossed in a haunting mixed-media piece when a familiar, drawling voice cut through the quiet. Well, if it isn't Lagos's very own Cinderella. Shopping for art to match the new penthouse? It was Uche, one of the socialites from the Ikoyi Club incident, flanked by two similarly sleek friends. Her smile was venomous. Tell me, does Adebayo choose the art, or do you just nod and say yes, Oga, like the old days? Chioma felt the old fear rise, mixed with a surge of white-hot anger. She remembered Uncle Chi Jayok's words, her mother's tears, the vile comments online. But she also remembered Adebayo's unwavering support, her own defiance in his study, the strength Shed found in Enugu. She turned slowly, meeting Uche's mocking gaze head-on. My taste in art, Chioma said, her voice calm and clear, echoing slightly in the gallery space, is my own, Ms. Obayagu, just as my choices are my own. Unlike some, I don't require my partner's validation to appreciate talent. She gestured towards the piece Uche was near. Though I'm surprised you're drawn to this. It requires a certain depth of feeling to understand. Uche's smile faltered, replaced by a flush of anger. Her friends tittered nervously. Before Uche could retort, Chioma gave a small, dismissive nod. Enjoy the exhibition. She turned her back on them and walked towards another section, her heart pounding, but her head held high. It was a small victory, but it was hers. That evening, Adebayo found her on her apartment balcony, watching the rain lash the city. He didn't speak, just stood beside her, sharing the silence. After a while, he slipped his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. They want us to hide, he murmured, his voice rough. To be ashamed. Let them whisper, Chioma replied, watching the rain cleanse the streets below. Let them point. Let them write their nasty articles. We know the truth. She turned her face towards him, a flicker of defiance in her eyes, mirroring his own. And we refuse to be invisible. They stood together in the downpour, a united front against the storm of judgment. The whispers hadn't stopped. The exclusion hadn't ended. But in their shared defiance, in their quiet solidarity, they forged their own sanctuary within the gilded cage of Lagos society. The network of whispers could try to isolate them, but it only succeeded in binding them closer together. The battle for acceptance was far from over, but the war for their right to exist together on their own terms had been decisively joined. The corrosive whispers of Lagos society and the sting of exclusion found a potent antidote in the concrete walls of the newly established Nwosuadila Foundation. Adebayo's vision, born from a desire to counter the narrative of exploitation and provide Chioma with a purpose that was undeniably hers, took shape with remarkable speed. Femi handled the legalities, but the heart and soul of the foundation were Chioma's. Located in a bright, airy space in a reputable Victoria Island office building, distinctly not within Adeola Holdings, the foundation focused on two pillars close to both their experiences: improving access to basic healthcare in underserved rural communities and empowering girls' education, particularly in science and technology. The names intertwined Nwosu Adila were a deliberate statement, a partnership. Chioma threw herself into the work with a ferocity that surprised even Adebayo. This wasn't charity as social ornamentation. It was deeply personal. She recalled the distant clinics of her childhood in Enugu, the preventable deaths whispered about in her community. She remembered Adeora's burning desire for education, the sacrifices made, and the doors it could open. Her office quickly became a war room of maps, community health reports, school enrollment statistics, and proposals from grassroots NGOs. Adebayo envisioned funding established hospital wings. Chioma, drawing on her understanding of geography and distrust of distant, impersonal institutions, proposed a fleet of custom-built mobile medical vans. In villages like Nkporo, where I grew up, she explained, pointing at a map spread across their dining table, now often doubling as a conference table. The nearest clinic is a 3-hour trek on market day. For a woman in labor, a child with malaria, that's a death sentence. Vans can reach them where they are. She spearheaded the design. Robust 4x4 vehicles equipped for basic diagnostics, vaccinations, prenatal care, and essential treatments, staffed by rotating teams of dedicated nurses and community health workers. Her input was practical, born of lived reality. Large water tanks for remote areas, fold-out shaded waiting areas, solar panels for reliable power. Seeing her passion and meticulous planning, Adebayo deferred to her expertise. "The vans are yours, Chioma," he declared, pride evident in his voice. For the education pillar, Chioma refused token scholarships. "Throwing money isn't enough," she insisted. "Girls need support, mentorship to see it's possible, especially in villages where science is for boys." She devised intensive residential boot camps during school holidays. Partnering with female engineers, doctors, and tech entrepreneurs, the camps offered hands-on robotics, coding workshops, biology labs, and crucially, mentorship sessions and life skills training. Chioma personally interviewed potential participants, looking for the spark Adeora possessed: curiosity, resilience, that hungry glint in the eyes. She ensured the camps included cultural sensitivity, connecting STEM to local challenges like clean water access or sustainable farming, making it relevant and inspiring. The public unveiling of the foundation was a carefully managed event. Adebayo spoke briefly about the vision, but deliberately handed the podium to Chioma. Adebayo spoke briefly about the vision, but deliberately handed the podium to Chioma. The mother, speaking softly in a mix of broken Yoruba and Pidgin, reassuring her while the child rested. A local journalist embedded with the clinic captured the moment. Chioma, focused, compassionate, her hand resting gently on the mother's arm. The image went viral within Nigerian social media circles. The caption read, "Director Nwosu, hands that once served in Ikoyi now bring healing to Ogun." The narrative began to shift, subtly but significantly. Bisola, visiting from London ostensibly to see her father but clearly observing Chioma, accompanied her on a visit to inspect a potential site for a girls' STEM boot camp near Abeokuta. She remained aloof, silently critical. She watched Chioma interact with the headmistress of a rural school, not with condescension, but with genuine interest and respect, asking insightful questions about the girls' challenges and aspirations. She saw Chioma effortlessly switch between fluent English with the headmistress and warm Pidgin with the curious students who gathered. Later, observing Chioma review architectural plans for a proposed dormitory block, pointing out practical concerns about ventilation and communal spaces based on her understanding of village life, Bisola finally broke her silence. "You really know this stuff, don't you? It's not just window dressing for Baba." Chioma looked up, surprised. "This isn't a game, Bisola. These girls, they deserve the chance Adeora fought for. The chance I almost didn't get. Knowing the realities isn't optional. It's essential." Bisola studied her for a long moment, the skepticism in her eyes warring with reluctant admiration. She saw the dirt on Chioma's shoes from the schoolyard, the focused intensity as she debated water filtration systems for the dormitory with the architect, the absence of any pretense. It was a far cry from the society wives who chaired charity committees but never visited the projects. At dinner that night, Bisola was quieter than usual. As Adebayo discussed foundation logistics, she suddenly interjected, directing her question to Chioma. That mobile clinic model, the one you insisted on, the data Femi showed me on projected reach versus static clinics, is actually quite compelling. It wasn't warmth, but it was acknowledgement. It was professional respect. Later, as Chioma prepared to leave, Bisola stopped her at the door. You work hard. For them. She gestured vaguely, meaning the unseen girls, the rural communities. I see why. Why he sees that in you. It was the closest she had come to acceptance. The Nwosuadila Foundation didn't silence the Lagos whispers overnight, but it provided a powerful counter-narrative. Chioma was no longer just the maid or Adebayo's girlfriend. She was Director Nwosu, a force in her own right. Her competence, her empathy, her tireless work ethic, showcased publicly through the Foundation's tangible actions, began to earn grudging respect, even from some former detractors. Invitations didn't flood back, but the Foundation started receiving genuine partnership requests from reputable NGOs, impressed by its practical approach. For Chioma, the Foundation was more than a role. It was her anchor, her purpose rediscovered and amplified. It validated her beyond her relationship with Adebayo. It gave her a voice, a platform, and the profound satisfaction of channeling her hardships into creating opportunities for others. Every mobile clinic rolling into a remote village, every girl's eyes lighting up at a robotics kit, was a silent rebuke to the gossip and a step towards building a future defined not by the past, but by the tangible good they could create together and individually. The Foundation wasn't just changing lives in rural Nigeria. It was steadily rebuilding Chioma Nwosu's place in the world, brick by purposeful brick. The Foundation's success and Chioma's growing public respect had chipped away at Lagos society's skepticism, but a far more entrenched and insidious barrier emerged from within Adebayo's own lineage, striking at the heart of tradition and identity. The fragile peace brokered with Bisola and the cautious acceptance from some quarters shattered when Adebayo's oldest living uncle, Baba Kaode, patriarch of the Adeola family's Ibadan branch, arrived unannounced at the Ikoyi mansion. Baba Kaode, a man whose very presence commanded deference, embodied old Yoruba aristocracy. His bearing was regal, his voice a low rumble of unquestioned authority. He hadn't attended the Ikoyi Club Gala, dismissing Lagos society as frivolous. But the whispers about Adebayo's Igbo maid had finally pierced his insular world, demanding intervention. The meeting in Adebayo's study was charged with ancestral weight. Omomi, Baba Kaode began, his tone grave, sipping the ceremonial palm wine Kola had served. This woman, Chioma Nwosu, her people, from Enugu, yes, Nwosu. He let the name hang, his eyes sharp and probing. Have you, fully inquired, about her lineage? Adebayo felt a cold dread prickle his spine. He knew where this was heading. Her lineage, uncle? She is from a respectable family in Ogwi. Her father was a teacher, her mother. Baba Kaode waved a dismissive hand. Respectable is not the question, Omomi. The blood is the question. The OSU taint. He uttered the word with a mixture of reverence and distaste, naming the ancient, discriminatory caste system still clinging stubbornly to life, particularly among older generations in Igbo and neighboring cultures. OSU, descendants of individuals historically dedicated to deities, considered ritually separate, untouchable by freeborn Diala lineages in matters of marriage. Adebayo's jaw tightened. Uncle, these are outdated superstitions, harmful divisions. Chioma's family are devout Christians. Her sister attends university. Outdated? Baba Kaode's voice rose, thundering in the quiet room. They are tradition. The blood carries the mark. To bring such lineage into the Adeola family, a family tracing its roots to Oranmian himself, it is an abomination. a desecration. He slammed his walking stick lightly on the floor for emphasis. You shame your ancestors, Adebayo. You jeopardize the spiritual purity of our line. Marry her, and your children will carry the stain. They will be outcasts among their own people. The venomous prejudice, couched in the language of sacred tradition, was a gut punch. Adebayo saw red. Her stain, uncle, he said, his voice dangerously low, is one of intelligence, resilience, and profound dignity. A stain I would bear with pride, compared to the stain of such bigotry. Baba Kaod recoiled as if struck. You dare speak to me thus? Blinded by this woman, I see clearly, uncle, more clearly than ever. I see prejudice masquerading as piety. I see fear of change disguised as respect for tradition. Chioma Nwosu is the woman I love. Her lineage, her spirit, her character, these are what matter. Not archaic labels designed to divide and dehumanize. The confrontation was fierce and unresolved. Baba Kaod left, promising to rally the wider Adeola family elders. The OSU question, once whispered, was now a weapon drawn, threatening to sever Adebayo from his roots and derail any hope of familial acceptance for Chioma and their future. Chioma learned of it indirectly. Bisola, her newfound respect warring with familial duty and ingrained cultural unease, called her, her voice strained. Chioma, there's a problem, a big one. The elders, Baba Kaod, they're raising the OSU issue. She couldn't bring herself to say the word directly to Chioma. Chioma felt the world tilt. The cold dread Adebayo had felt became a physical chill spreading through her. OSU. The word was a curse whispered in the darkest corners, a shadow her family had fought for generations to escape through education, conversion, and sheer determination. A shadow she thought buried in Enugu's past, irrelevant in cosmopolitan Lagos. To have it dredged up, weaponized by Adebayo's family to brand her unworthy. The humiliation was profound, ancestral, and terrifying. She sank onto her sofa, the air knocked out of her. Was this the insurmountable wall? Could love conquer centuries of ingrained prejudice? Adebayo arrived soon after, his face etched with fury and concern. He found her pale, shaken. Chioma. He gathered her hands, cold in his. I won't let them do this. I swear to you. The stain. Chioma whispered, the word tasting like ash. They say it's on the blood. On any children. Her voice broke. The fear her mother had harbored, fear of rejection, of being seen as lesser, crystallized in its most brutal traditional form. Listen to me, Adebayo said, kneeling before her, his gaze fierce. Your blood carries strength, intelligence, and love. That is your inheritance. That is the legacy we would pass on. These labels, they are chains of ignorance. I will break them. He didn't dismiss the issue lightly. He understood its deep roots. He enlisted Femi and, crucially, sought guidance from Chief Adekunle, not the blustering industrialist, but a highly respected, progressive Yoruba elder and retired professor of African history and anthropology, known for challenging harmful traditions while preserving cultural essence. Chief Adekunle received them in his bookline study. He listened gravely as Adebayo explained the situation, Chioma sitting silently beside him, her posture radiating quiet dignity despite her inner turmoil. The OSU system, Chief Adekunle began, his voice measured and scholarly, is indeed a painful relic. Born in a different time for different reasons, it has been distorted into a tool of oppression, contrary to the original communal intent. To apply it today, especially across ethnic lines, to a woman of evident character and achievement. He shook his head. It is not tradition. It is cruelty disguised as custom. He advised a path of respect and resistance. Acknowledge the elders' concerns formally, but firmly reject the discriminatory application. He offered to mediate. The Igbankwu, the traditional Yoruba introductory meeting between families, became the necessary, high-stakes battleground. It was held not in the village, but in a neutral, prestigious event space in Lagos, a concession to modernity. The atmosphere crackled with tension. On one side, Baba Kaod, flanked by 3 other stern-faced Adeola elders, radiating disapproval. On the other, Chioma, accompanied by her uncle Chi Jiok, present only out of fierce, protective clan duty, his expression skeptical. Her mother Neka, terrified but holding Chioma's hand tightly, and Edaora, wide-eyed and nervous. Adebayo sat beside Chioma, an immovable pillar of support. Chief Adekunal presided as a neutral but influential mediator. Baba Kaode, adhering to ritual but unable to mask his disdain, formally presented cola nuts and palm wine. The customary pleasantries were frosty. Then came the inevitable. "We welcome the Nwosu family," Baba Kaode intoned, his eyes fixed not on them, but somewhere beyond. But before the deeper discussions, before the union of families can be contemplated, a matter of lineage must be cleansed. The OSU question hangs heavy over this gathering. It is a barrier ordained by the ancestors. Palpable chill descended. Uncle Chi Jiok bristled but remained silent under the weight of Yoruba protocol. Neka squeezed Chioma's hand painfully tight. Before Chioma could be forced to defend her very bloodline, Adebayo spoke. His voice, deep and resonant, filled the room. Honored elders, Baba Kaode, Chief Adekunal, respected Nwosu family. He acknowledged all parties. The matter of lineage has been raised. I hear the concerns voiced in the name of tradition. He paused, his gaze sweeping the Adeola elders. But I stand before you not just as Adebayo Adeola, son of this lineage, but as a man who has chosen his life partner with clear eyes and an open heart. Chioma Nwosu's lineage is one of educators, of resilience, of faith. To reduce her, or any human being, to an archaic label born of misinterpreted history is an injustice. He turned to Chief Adekunal. Chief, you have spoken wisely of the OSU system's origins and its harmful distortion. We cannot build a future shackled by the prejudices of the past. Chief Adekunal nodded solemnly. The young Adebayo speaks truth, Baba Kaode. Tradition is a river. It must flow, carrying forward what nourishes, leaving behind what poisons. To deny this union based on this claim is to cling to poison. It brings no honor. It only perpetuates pain. Baba Kaode's face was stone. The blood carries what it carries. The ancestors demand justice, compassion, and the strength to evolve. Adebayo interjected, his voice rising with passion, yet devoid of disrespect. I love Chioma Nwosu. I respect her family. I honor my own ancestors by choosing integrity over ignorance, love over fear. This union will proceed. He looked directly at Chioma, his gaze unwavering. With or without the blessing that should rightfully accompany it. But we seek it. We seek understanding. The silence was thick enough to choke on. The Adeola elders exchanged uneasy glances. Baba Kaode stared at Adebayo, seeing not a rebellious nephew, but a man of unwavering conviction, backed by the respected Chief Adekunal and the undeniable presence of Chioma, who sat with quiet grace despite the onslaught. The power dynamics had shifted. Finally, Baba Kaode spoke, his voice grudging, devoid of warmth but lacking its earlier venom. The ways of the young, they are swift like the river, eroding the banks of the old. He didn't bless them. He didn't withdraw the accusation, but he offered a brittle concession. The Adeola name is strong. His bearer has chosen his path. We note the counsel of Chief Adekunal. It was a face-saving retreat, a refusal to endorse but a cessation of open warfare. The formalities may continue. He gestured dismissively towards the cola nuts. It wasn't acceptance. It was a tense, fragile truce. The OSU shadow hadn't vanished. It had been forced back, but not banished. For Chioma, the meeting was an ordeal that left her emotionally drained, yet strangely empowered. Adebayo had stood before his most formidable elders and defended her humanity, her worth, against an ancient, dehumanizing prejudice. He had drawn a line in the sand of tradition itself. As they left the tense gathering, Adebayo took Chioma's hand. Neka looked at him with newfound, tearful respect. Uncle Chi Jiok's perpetual skepticism seemed slightly shaken. Edaora simply looked awed. We faced the dragon, Adebayo murmured to Chioma as they walked away. And we didn't get eaten, she replied, a shaky smile touching her lips, leaning into his strength. The path ahead remained steeped in tradition and complexity, but the most dangerous cultural fault line had been crossed. Their love story, born in an Ikoyi storm, had weathered the tremors of ancestral prejudice and emerged, scarred but unbroken, ready for the next rite of passage, building a future together. The fragile truce brokered after the Igbenku was short-lived. The embers of disapproval, fanned by the lingering prejudice of some Adeola elders and the ever-present envy within Lagos society, ignited into one final, desperate blaze. Just as the couple began tentatively planning a future, navigating the complex logistics of blending their worlds, the serpent struck. City Scoop, the same tabloid that had previously vilified Chioma, dropped a bombshell. This time, the headline screamed, "Maid tale exposed. Billionaire's fiancé caught in web of lies." Below it, a grainy, time-stamped photo from a security camera inside the Ikoyi mansion. Chioma, drenched and vulnerable, clutching a towel to her chest in her doorway. Adebayo frozen in the hallway beyond. The accompanying article was a masterpiece of malicious fabrication. 4 months, Adebayo Adeola has peddled a fairy tale romance with his former housemaid, Chioma Nwosu, painting her as a paragon of virtue. But City Scoop can exclusively reveal the sordid truth behind their love story. This damning image, captured months ago, shows the shocking moment Mr. Adeola walked in on his scantily clad maid. Sources confirm this was no accident, but part of a calculated seduction by the ambitious Ms. Nwosu. Insiders reveal she exploited this accidental intimacy to ensnare the grieving billionaire, leveraging guilt and manipulation to climb from servant to fiancé. Her dignified resignation? A carefully staged exit after her trap was sprung. The Nwosu Adila Foundation? Mere window dressing funded by Adeola millions to launder her image. Is this the woman Lagos society is expected to embrace? A schemer who used her employer's home as her boudoir? The truth is clear. This isn't love. It's the oldest profession disguised as a Cinderella story. The impact was nuclear. The photo was a profound violation, dredging up Chioma's deepest trauma and twisting it into something predatory and sordid. The article weaponized the most vulnerable moment of her life, the incident that had sparked this entire journey, and used it to eviscerate her character and reduce their relationship to a tawdry cliché. Online, the trolls and bigots erupted with renewed vitriol. See, told you she was a slut, gold-digging whore, exploiting a vulnerable man. Even some who had been cautiously accepting reeled back, the image shockingly intimate, the narrative insidiously plausible to those who wanted to believe the worst. Chioma read the article in her foundation office, her hands shaking so violently the tablet clattered to the floor. Nausea overwhelmed her. It wasn't just the lies. It was the violation of that intensely private, shaming moment broadcast for the world to leer at. She felt physically ill, stripped bare all over again. The progress, the hard-won respect, it felt obliterated in an instant. She locked her office door, sank to the floor, and wept tears of rage, humiliation, and profound despair. Adebayo was in a critical board meeting when Femi burst in, his face ashen. Seeing the headline and photo, Adebayo's fury was volcanic. "Get everyone out," he commanded Femi, his voice dangerously quiet. When the room emptied, he slammed his fist onto the polished table, a guttural roar escaping him. The violation of Chioma, the cynical twisting of their story, the sheer malice, it ignited a protective rage unlike anything he'd ever known. "Burn them, Femi," he snarled. "Burn them to the fucking ground." Femi was already moving. Legal firepower, held in reserve since the first article, was unleashed with precision and ferocity. Within hours, 1. Cease and desist VE takedown notices. Cityscoop's website hosting provider received immediate legal threats, forcing the article offline globally within minutes. 2. Defamation lawsuit. A suit was filed, not just for defamation, but for intentional infliction of emotional distress, invasion of privacy, for publishing private security footage without consent, and cyber harassment. The demanded damages were astronomical, designed to cripple the publication. 3. Source hunt. Private investigators were dispatched to trace the insider source who leaked the security footage, with threats of criminal prosecution. 4. Social media purge. Teams began issuing takedown demands and copyright strikes against every major platform hosting the image or article excerpts. But Adebayo knew legal battles took time. Chioma needed vindication now. The world needed to hear the truth directly from him. He canceled his schedule and drove straight to Chioma's apartment. He found her curled on the sofa, eyes red raw, looking utterly broken. He gathered her into his arms, holding her trembling form, murmuring words of love and fury against her hair. They will pay Ifemi, I swear it, and the world will hear our truth. Instead of hiding, Adebayo chose the nuclear option for the counterattack. He called a press conference at the Eco Hotel, the venue symbolizing the pinnacle of Lagos establishment. The room buzzed with anticipation: journalists, society watchers, the merely curious. Rumors swirled. Would he dump her? Apologize? Deny? Adebayo entered alone, his expression grim, radiating an authority that silenced the room instantly. He walked to the podium, just the microphone, and looked directly into the bank of cameras. For weeks, he began, his voice low but carrying immense weight. My fiancé, Chioma Nwosu, and I have endured malicious lies, slander, and a grotesque invasion of privacy perpetrated by City Scoop. Today's article crossed every line of decency and legality. He paused, letting the condemnation hang. Legal action is underway. The publication will be held fully accountable. The source of the illegally obtained security footage will be prosecuted. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. But legal recourse isn't enough. Chioma deserves the truth to be told. Loudly, clearly. He took a deep breath, his voice thick with emotion. The photograph they published, it captures a moment of profound vulnerability, born from a genuine accident during a violent storm. My accident, my intrusion into her private space. It was a moment that filled me with shame and remorse, not lust. It was the catalyst, not for some sordid seduction, but for my own awakening, my realization that I had been blind for years to the remarkable woman working in my home. He spoke with raw honesty about that day, his rush to save a rug, his thoughtless intrusion, Chioma's terror. He spoke of his guilt, his subsequent journey of truly seeing her strength, intelligence, compassion, and dignity. What City Scoop portrays as a calculated seduction was, in reality, my journey towards recognizing Chioma's worth. My pursuit of her respect. My struggle to dismantle the barriers my position created, so she could freely choose whether to know me. He then shifted, his voice gaining fierce pride. And her choice? She chose to build something meaningful. Look beyond the tabloid filth and see the woman who built the Nwosu Adila Foundation from vision to reality. See the director who travels to remote villages, not for photo ops, but to ensure children get vaccinated and girls dream of becoming engineers. That is Chioma Nwosu. Not a schemer, but a builder. Not a victim, but a warrior. And not just my fiancé. He paused, his next words deliberate and resonant. But the love of my life. He held up his left hand, revealing a simple, elegant platinum band on his ring finger. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The lies end today. The speculation ends today. Chioma Nwosu and I are engaged. We will be married. We choose love over lies, integrity over prejudice, and a future built together on mutual respect. He didn't take questions. He simply stated, the truth has been told. Good day, and walked off the stage, leaving a stunned silence that quickly erupted into a cacophony of shouts and flashing cameras. The press conference clip went viral globally. Adebayo's raw emotion, his unflinching defense, his public claiming of Chioma not just as his fiancée but as the love of his life, and the shocking reveal of the engagement ring. It was a masterstroke. The narrative flipped spectacularly. Headlines shifted. Adebayo fights for fiancé, the love of my life, Billionaire blasts tabloids, confirms engagement to former maid, from scandal to love story. Adebayo's powerful defense. Public sentiment, fueled by the visible injustice and Adebayo's passionate declaration, swung overwhelmingly in their favor. City Scoop was universally condemned. That evening, Adebayo arrived at Chioma's apartment. She had watched the press conference live, trembling, weeping anew, but this time, tears of catharsis, of vindication, of overwhelming love. He didn't speak. He simply opened his arms, and she flew into them, burying her face in his chest. Later, sitting on her balcony overlooking the quieting city, he handed her a simple, steaming mug. Zobo, the deep red liquid, fragrant and familiar. A silent callback to the anchor she had thrown him in his darkest hour. She took a sip, the tart sweetness calming her frayed nerves. "You were magnificent today," she whispered, her voice husky with emotion. "The ring. You surprised the world." "I surprised myself," he admitted, a small smile playing on his lips. "But seeing that filth they printed, seeing you hurt, I knew hiding our joy was no longer an option. I wanted the world to know you are mine, and I am yours." Officially, proudly. He took the mug gently from her hands and set it aside. Then he reached into the mug, past the warm liquid. Chioma watched, puzzled, as his fingers closed around something small hidden within the mug itself, nestled against the bottom. He withdrew a breathtaking ring, a flawless emerald-cut diamond set in a band of woven platinum, elegant and strong. Chioma's breath caught. "Chioma," Adebayo said, his voice thick with emotion, kneeling before her chair on the balcony where their journey had taken so many pivotal turns. The city lights glittered below, witnesses to their saga. "That cup of Zobo you left me. It was more than tea. It was hope. It was strength. It was the quiet certainty that storms pass, anchored by kindness." He held up the ring, the diamond catching the moonlight. "You anchored me then. You anchor me now. You are my harbor, my strength, my unexpected, perfect love. Chioma Nwosu, will you do me the profound honor of becoming my wife? Not for society, not for legacy, but for every quiet moment, every shared challenge, every sunrise we faced together?" Tears streamed freely down Chioma's face, not of pain, but of pure, radiant joy. The scandal's last gasp had been silenced, not by denial, but by the overwhelming power of their truth and his very public love. She looked at the man who had fought societal dragons, ancestral prejudice, and tabloid venom for her. The man who saw her, cherished her, and now knelt offering not just a ring, but his whole heart. "Yes," she breathed, the word a joyful sob. "Yes, Adebayo. 1,000 times, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. Then he stood, pulling her up into his arms. Their kiss, under the Lagos moon, was a seal on their past battles and a promise for their future. The scandal was over. The whispers would fade. Their love story, born in a storm, tested by fire, and declared before the world, was now entering its most radiant chapter. Building a life together, anchored in the deep, quiet certainty of the love they had fought so hard to claim. The Zobo steam curled upwards into the night, a fragrant testament to their journey from a moment of chaos to this moment of perfect, hard-won peace. Dawn broke over Lagos, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, as if the city itself was dressing for celebration. The sprawling gardens of the Ikoyi mansion, once a stage for isolation and silent tension, were transformed. Lush floral arches draped in crimson and gold oak fabric framed the lagoon vista. Chairs upholstered in rich Ankara prints faced a beautifully decorated canopy where traditional Yoruba rites would blend seamlessly with personal vows. The air thrummed not just with the buzz of preparation, but with the palpable energy of a profound reconciliation and hard-won joy. Chioma stood in a sunlit room overlooking the gardens, a vision of serene radiance. Her wedding attire was a masterpiece of Nigerian heritage and modern elegance. A fitted, off-the-shoulder buba blouse in ivory lace, paired with a grand, flowing Iro skirt in deep indigo oak, intricately woven with threads of gold. A magnificent geli headwrap, sculpted into regal peaks, framed her face, adorned with delicate gold jewelry. Not the billionaire's ostentatious display, but heirloom pieces borrowed from Mama Ibeg and gifted by her tearfully proud mother. Coral beads, traditional and significant, graced her neck and wrists. She looked not like a former maid, but like a queen, confident, luminous, rooted in her culture yet stepping boldly into her new future. A soft knock announced Aora, resplendent in a coral pink iro and buba, her eyes wide with awe. Chioma, you look like Moremi Ejisoro reborn. She breathed, invoking the legendary Yoruba queen known for her beauty and courage. Chioma smiled, her eyes shimmering. Today, Nwanyem, I feel like I can conquer anything. She squeezed her sister's hand, her anchor. Downstairs, Adebayo had just the embroidered neckline of his crisp white agbada over a gold-embroidered dansiki, his heart pounding with a nervous anticipation unlike any boardroom challenge. He exchanged a look with Femi, his best man, a silent acknowledgement of the tumultuous path that had led here. Bisola, radiant in a sapphire blue gown, approached him. She hadn't just accepted. She had embraced the planning, her initial skepticism replaced by genuine affection for Chioma. She had just his fila cap with a tenderness that spoke volumes. Ready, Baba? She asked, her eyes warm. Ready, he affirmed, his voice thick with emotion. Is she? Stunning, Bisola confirmed, a genuine smile spreading. Utterly stunning. The ceremony commenced not with a processional march, but with the resonant, ancient rhythms of the Dundan drums. Their complex, talking beats filled the air, telling stories, invoking blessings, setting a vibrant, celebratory pulse. Guests, a curated blend of Adebayo's loyal friends who had stood by him, Chioma's family, Uncle Chijayok present, stern but no longer hostile, Foundation colleagues, and a few brave Lego Society figures who had genuinely shifted their views, turned as one. Chioma emerged, not on her father's arm, lost long ago, but escorted proudly by her maternal uncle, her mother Neka walking just behind, tears of joy and disbelief streaming down her face, her earlier fears washed away by the tangible love and respect surrounding her daughter. A collective gasp rippled through the gathering. She moved with innate grace, the indigo and gold asook shimmering, her head held high, a picture of dignified beauty that silenced any lingering doubt. Adebayo felt his breath catch. The sight of her, radiant and strong, walking towards him under the floral canopy, was a physical blow of love and awe. All the battles, the whispers, the prejudice, melted away in that moment. She was his miracle, his unexpected bloom. He stepped forward to meet her halfway, a symbolic gesture of their journey towards each other. The Alaga Ijo, the masterful mistress of ceremonies, a renowned orator steeped in tradition, took her place. Her voice, rich and powerful, wove proverbs and praise songs, but she deftly tailored them to the unique couple before her. Imawa omoti are with grave fun niowo. Behold the child blessed by the gods. She began, her gaze encompassing both. Today, we gather not just to join man and woman, but to celebrate a journey as remarkable as the path of the snail, leaving its silver trail across thorn and stone. We witness the union of Adebayo Adeola, the Akin warrior, whose wealth is matched only by the depth of his heart's courage, and Chioma Nwosu, the Amadan, beautiful one, whose strength shines brighter than any gold, whose compassion flows deeper than the Niger. She recounted their story, not with salacious detail, but with poetic resonance. From the storm that brought an unwitting gaze, a seed of awareness was planted. Through the fertile ground of mutual respect, watered by tears shed and challenges met, a mighty Irako tree has grown. We saw the warrior defend his Amadan not just with wealth, but with truth before the world. We saw the Amadan build bridges of healing where others saw only chasms. Their love is not a fragile vine, but the Asa rope, woven strong from many threads, respect, perseverance, shared vision, and an unyielding belief in each other's spirit. As the traditional prayers were offered, kola nuts broken, and cups of palm wine shared, The atmosphere was thick with emotion, not just ritual. When it came time for the vows, they chose to speak directly to each other. In English, their voices clear and strong under the canopy. Adebayo took Chioma's hands, his eyes locked on hers. Chioma Nwosu, you entered my life as a quiet force of order. You became my unexpected compass, my anchor in chaos, my mirror showing me my own blindness and my potential for better sight. You taught me that true strength lies in dignity, resilience, and unwavering kindness. I vow to honor you, cherish you, stand beside you, and fight for you every single day. I vow to nurture the fire of your spirit and the depth of your dreams. You are my home, my heart, my greatest blessing. I am yours utterly. Chioma, tears of pure happiness glistening on her cheeks, smiled, her voice steady and filled with love. Adebayo Adeola, you saw me when I was invisible. You challenged a world determined to keep me small. You fought dragons, societal, familial, even those within yourself, to claim me, not as a possession, but as an equal partner. You gave me wings through respect and a platform to soar. I vow to be your sanctuary, your unwavering support, and your partner in building a legacy of meaning. I vow to cherish your strength and your vulnerability, to walk beside you through every storm and every sunrise. You are my love, my champion, my safe harbor. I am yours completely. The Alaga I Jo beamed. Abinran T I Rowo Sile. Oko T I Be Loku. The woman who extends her hand, the husband who lifts her high. Let the drums speak their joy. And the drums sang. The rhythmic, jubilant beats of the Bata and Dundon exploded, calling everyone to their feet. The formal ceremony dissolved into the Ijo Igbiawo, the celebratory wedding dance. Adebayo and Chioma stepped onto the cleared space, hands clasped. They began to move, not with rehearsed steps, but with the natural, joyful rhythm of their connection. Adebayo, usually so reserved, moved with a surprising grace, his eyes never leaving Chioma's. Chioma, radiant, her indigo skirt swirling, her smile wide and free, danced with an abandon that spoke of chains finally broken. Bisola grabbed Adeora's hand, pulling her into the dance circle. Femi twirled a laughing Mama Ibeg. Neka, tears still flowing but now solely of joy, clapped and swayed, her fears replaced by overwhelming pride. Even Uncle Chi Jayok, standing at the edge, allowed a small, grudging smile to touch his lips as he watched his niece, once just a housemaid, now a radiant bride dancing with a billionaire who adored her, surrounded by acceptance and joy. Baba Kaode had not come, but his absence was a quiet footnote, not a shadow. As the dance reached its peak, Adebayo pulled Chioma close, his forehead resting against hers amidst the swirling colors and infectious music. The mansion, the lagoon, the watching guests, it all faded away. There was only the rhythm of the drums, the warmth of their joined hands, the shared breath, and the profound, silent understanding passing between them. They had weathered the storm. They had crossed the threshold. They had danced through fire and emerged, not just intact, but radiantly, joyfully united. Later, under a canopy of stars, the mansion no longer felt like Adebayo's solitary fortress. Lit with warm lanterns, filled with laughter and the lingering melodies of the shakir and talking drums, it pulsed with life and shared happiness. Chioma stood on the terrace where their journey had taken so many pivotal turns, Adebayo's arm around her waist. They looked out at the shimmering lagoon, then back at the celebration, their families mingling, Bisola showing Adeora something on her phone, Mama Ibg dancing with Kola, Femi deep in conversation with Chioma's uncle. It's different now, Chioma murmured, leaning her head against Adebayo's shoulder. The house feels alive. Adebayo pressed a kiss to her temple, his gaze sweeping over the scene, the vibrant tapestry of their joined lives. It's not just a house anymore. Iowomi, my wife, he said softly, the Yoruba term for wife feeling like the most natural title in the world. It's our home. The Alaga Ijas final proverb echoed softly in the night air, carried on the warm breeze. Iji Gagoro Maguin mi lo ju, Adakir In B Ninu Ri. Though the tall tree towers high, the squirrel finds its home within. The mighty tree and the resourceful squirrel. The billionaire and the woman of quiet dignity. They had found their home, not in spite of their differences, but within the unique, resilient bond they had forged. The Okoye mansion, witness to their beginning, their trials, and their triumphs, was finally simply home. The unexpected bloom had not just survived. It had flourished, filling their world with the vibrant, enduring colors of love, respect, and hard-won joy. The joyful dance had ended, but the music of their life together had just begun.